Last time I did 100 shows, ruined my life, and still couldn't speak like a normal person. Now it's only 30 shows, my life hasn't recovered, and I'm way better at pretending I'm a normal person who enjoys the sun and parties. If this video doesn't get the 30 views, I'll do that scene from Thelma and Louise, but in real life. Netflix had a million hidden gems, good critical chance at 37 bangers. Meanwhile with Prime, I'd hardly surprise anyone telling them in Monkey Kid Solo, which means that despite having some hidden gems we'll discuss in this video, the experience here was a lot more gruesome. See, Prime only had 9 good shows. 9! Ooh, I guess I'm German now? That means I forced my poor little brain to sit through blunder after fumble in between a lot of shows aimed at kids, not to mention stuff like Secret Level, blatantly trying to copy Netflix's success. And still, the weirdest category isn't any of those 4, because Prime managed to create a new one that you'd never expect on Netflix. And that's Hazbin Hotel. If you point out that it's hotel in the comments one time, I will punch you. Oh, look, a nifty little counter so you can keep track of how many shows I've discussed and how many of them are even good. And I hope you understand why I'm starting with Hazbin Hotel, because this has got to be one of the most weirdly controversial shows ever. It constantly gets shat on. People claiming its characters are boring and cliché, people complaining about the swearing, people talking about the sexual abuse discussion being strange and unrealistic, all the failed metaphors, literal 10-year-olds singing the song about sticking it up to your pimp at their birthday party. And you know what else? This show went to Broadway? Meanwhile I've gone to court for battery and assault. I'm so proud of myself and everything I've accomplished in life. Let's make something clear. I've done absolutely nothing wrong, I am not— okay, no. I feel like this show gets treated like the worst thing that's happened since Scrappy 2 hit poop culture? Okay, sure, we'll leave it at that. And while I'm not about to claim it's any sort of masterpiece, it's also not like that bad either. It's just a lady who has extremely good sense in charismatic character design that then made a show, and as it turns out, the writing isn't the best. So the show about a force, heaven or hell system where characters are labeled as good or bad forever based on religious ideas that they had to follow during 100 years or so, first showcases that all the gay people go to hell while having the character of Adam, the first human, be an absolute piece of shit as an exaggerated way to demonstrate that the moral system the very show is complaining about actually sucks? That's homophobic? Did the media literacy blast off again? That's the kind of way criticism for the show goes. People love taking anything that happens at complete face value without a shred of suspension of disbelief. In case you don't know, there's this character called Angel Dust who is a hypersexual gay sex worker, and he's been the subject of so many videos about how the character is a terrible, flawed representation of victims of sexual assault. And full disclosure, I'm not gonna pretend he isn't. The writing around him definitely has its issues, particularly in the second season, which I generally found weaker than the first, which I think is a controversial opinion, I'm not sure. Angel Dust is not a good representation of abuse victims, but that's largely because he's not supposed to be? From the language in the show, it should be super evident that characters in this show don't tend to do therapy speech. Nothing about it really points to the characters being accurate portrayals of whatever complicated topics that are part of their backstory. It's about trying to write an interesting character around a complex issue rather than about writing an accurate description of those issues. He wouldn't be as interesting if he didn't glamorize his life around coping with the situation, even if real abuse victims would handle it very differently. Who does his hair? Why does it look like that? Where are the barbers in hell? Bibsy wanted to have a character who is a victim of abuse having to break away from decades of certain status quo over the fact that someone else can find them appealing enough for a normal, healthy relationship. And I'd go as far as to say that the strongest part of the show for me is the Angel Dust and Husky storyline. Still, I don't know why so many people began implying that you can't write and discuss SA victims unless it's an accurate portrayal. Heck, Angel has a good enough support system that he could literally just beat his abuser. That would destroy the entire message and be even more unrealistic. But that was never the point. The point is to be entertaining and have something of a complex character that's rooted on a complex issue. I'd understand the complaints if it was malicious or disrespectful, but it isn't. So I'm left confused as to where all this controversy comes from, but I think I have an inkling.
You're now listening to 102.3 Real Rock FM. This is your granny's station.
Hazbin Hotel is one of the few animated shows with a pilot released as a web series that then went on to be a fully produced show by a major studio in a big company. I know Glitch has gotten really big recently, but we're not talking about you today. You can't be the star of every show. And Hazbin Hotel itself was not very good then, and still isn't now. The people greenlighting this project probably had evidence to the fact with hell of a buzz, which already showcases Bib's unique dialogue style. But that's not something people online have easily managed to do, and the ones that have did it so bad, it's borderline repulsive. Yes, this is another stray at Oddballs. I will never stop throwing strays at Oddballs. We're showing the planet, give him the whole dog pound. Once you break away from the perspective that character writing is a field of writing that has no suspension of disbelief, that everything has to be factual and realistic, I genuinely think the writing, at least, makes sense. It's not a golden standard, but it doesn't deserve as much hate as it gets by any means. And if that's bold to say, call me Roboto Semiball 17. Let's pivot to another topic. Regardless of what people think the show should or shouldn't be morally, there's stuff I can talk about that's less socially charged, like the music. This is a musical, and yeah, I don't know what I actually think about the music. So in general, I think Season 2 is worse than Season 1, largely because the writing in Season 2 genuinely feels like it lobotomized all the characters in order to make Box actually seem like a threat, ultimately undermining most of the actual characters except for one, Alistair, the radio demon fella with a good design, only because his entire role in that season is to pretend to be lobotomized as a strategy, and then he reveals it like, haha, I was pretending to be lobotomized all along! Whoa, that was actually pretty good delivery. Indie animators should call me. Season 2 in general was just yikes. I didn't get that at all with Season 1 despite being messier, and to an extent, a similar thing happens with the music. Like, the music in Season 2 seems a lot better, but I swear I can't recall a single song, and I watched it like 2 months ago. This doesn't happen with the first season, even though the music there seems more relaxed. Like, I still catch myself going, "Loser, baby, look," because I like his voice, okay? The music there wasn't theatrical, but it felt genuine, whereas Season 2's music feels more polished and musical, but it's also kind of by the books, which makes the amateur-style lyrics stand out more than they did before. It's like Center World with no prose. Why did I even bring Center World into this? Blah. At least I haven't seen 10-year-olds dancing the song about turning genocide into a principle of nature, so that's cool. I don't know. I can't bring myself to hate the show because, sure, it's not a treasure trove of fantastic ideas and beautiful writing, but I gotta say, the music, characters, designs, and even a bit of the writing, they're all elements that have merit to them. An actual attempt to tell a good story with complicated moral questions, far too ambitious for a show like it to answer. That would be good criticism. In fact, I tend to agree with most criticisms of the show when they actually interface with the writing instead of a psychology book. The writers want to get serious, and yet they are contending with this dialogue. The fucking characters freaking use cotton-picking swears like a flipping 13-year-old asshole who just Fleming discovered they can fucking call other fuckers twats without fudging getting into deep shit. And let me tell ya, this is a shame as a Spanish speaker, because I think this would work perfectly fine with the gamut of insults you can make with Latin American Spanish. Recently talked about this in the Drawn Together video, so watch it after if you're interested in that, but the most evident critiques are the animation ones. For starters, I can practically taste the Toon Boom harmony in its bones. They absolutely improve it for a bunch of cuts in Season 2, but there's always stuff that peeps me, like the weird drop shadows the characters always have as if they were perpetual YouTube thumbnails. Favorite bit has got to be how the character design is so good that it goes back around to being stupid because they occasionally just spoil their supposed twists. No way! The angel-looking character actually is a fallen angel? I didn't see that coming. Not even from far away enough to disprove Flat Earth theory entirely. That's it, yeah, it fits into its own category because of that. It manages to be such a divisive show between insane hate and insane love. The entire show is kinda running on appeal more than on merit, which is a little silly from the perspective of more critical viewers. And yet, this is the 10th place in my list. That's the upper echelon of Amazon Prime animated series, which initially sounds impressive until I tell you, it isn't. Trust me, this service doesn't have more than 20 shows that are fine, which means you're in luck. You get to learn about the good shows while I had to sit through so many flops. Seriously, Amazon Prime Video is struggling. Case in point, The Boys Diabolical. Oh, I'm gonna do the Jujutsu Kaisen thing, hold on. I wish I had the budget to make my avatar do that, but I don't have the budget. Support me on Patreon. Prime has 3 anthological series, the other 2 being Secret Level, as well as Fujimoto's one-shot collection. We'll get into that one later. Point is, the idea of a The Boys anthology series not that bad. It is an interesting world where hating superheroes is basically a conspiracy theory and the superpowers can make even decent people run rampant with their power. Meanwhile, there's hero orgies and Anthony Starr hopefully getting 17 calls to act on Oscar-worthy roles. My man can act. My man can act wearing a suit that makes fart noises every single time he moves. The Boys itself is far from a perfect show. They really let us down after the 3rd season where the show just kinda lost all the sauce. But then you have this show, and what a stinker! And all of its episodes. There's a few that are fine, but overall it feels extremely mediocre aside from the insane talent on display, because not a single one of these episodes was necessary, but they're all relatively well done. Like they called Justin Roiland to make an episode with the style of Rick and Morty, and the episode is basically a bunch of kids with really shitty superpowers killing their parents as revenge for injecting them with B, that's the medicine that turns people into superheroes in The Boys. It's an uncomfortable episode with nothing to say. It's just a bunch of The Boys, trademark, patented gore, trademark, and then there's a weird moment where apparently Bot has to cover up that Homelander killed a bunch of murderous children, which, no, that's supposed to be his job. Like, I get it, fucked up to kill kids, but it genuinely feels like they just put this here to make us think, oh my god, Bot is so shady. Like, yes, we know, that's the point. But in the episode, there's literally not a single bit of narrative payoff, and I hated it for that. But also, I can't deny the creativity around all the mutilation in the short. It's bad, written with the bluntness of a sledgehammer, but it's also well done. And a similar thing happens with the other episodes. One episode is a rubber hose animation story about a scientist protecting a baby with superpowers, and it looks really good. But the actual story plays like one of those Mindy Animaniac segments that nobody ever liked, which was a shame. This episode would have been really cool if it was instead one of those propaganda cartoons that in-universe Bot keeps making to save face. But no, it would be really problematic if someone who hasn't watched the real show was thinking Huey could be evil? We don't want that now, do we? One episode is about this guy who reconstructs his face using super cream like it's a shitty social media focused version of the substance, and it literally has nothing to do with The Boys except that Ashley shows up one time and it does look good when she shows up like that. The only episode that I think looks genuinely bad is this one, which is meant to be all anime and shit, but it's like clearly made by someone who doesn't even watch anime, so it looks fake and stupid. And then the story is... Okay, get this. The girl's superpower is that her shit is sentient, and she's voiced by Aquafina. They've done it again! They've done it again! Almost forgot to talk about this episode with a girl watching her parents get divorced, and it was like 4 times with no sense. The most 6 out of 10 thing ever, alright? And the other 3 episodes... No complaints. We get a bit of an episode adapting the comic that the actual show is based on. It has a bunch of stuff that the show didn't really have time to put in, like Jack from Jupiter or Bald Huey, which, by the way, Jack Wade should have been bald for the final season of the actual show. Would have been drank, and now he's playing a Q. Remember season 1 and 2 Homelander, where his character was more than evil Superman that likes milk and is an allegory to Trump? Yeah, there's an episode about him joining the Seven. Can't go wrong with that. We also get a genuine anime episode about this guy who injects his wife with B to save her, and it has a lot of parallels with the actual show because it does a similar episode, but it really just shows that they should have done more with the writing of these stories. Every single one of them is too busy trying to be brutal and edgy that they neglected considering making good short stories. And I won't lie to you, making short stories is extremely easy. Find a good idea, introduce a character with a problem, 2 paragraphs of them struggling with a problem, and end it repeating the bit at the start, but this time the character either doesn't have the problem or has the problem tenfold. Of course, iterate on this and switch it up, but it's a basic structure that I can apply to every good episode of Love, Death and Robots, the other anthology show that, we're gonna see Prime was desperate to copy at some point. Artist is obsessed with a shade of blue. He struggles with the usage of the blue. Eventually it's revealed the blue was a spiritual wish to return to prior simplicity. Maniac lady thinks she's in jail for killing her whole family, but actually she's just struggling with the thought of trying to massacre her whole family because she's been an abuse victim here and at the end prefers to leave rather than existing with that mind frame. Turn to this show and maybe 2 episodes follow this format. The rest are just trying to show you how something or other looks. But if Roiland made The Boys, did you know divorce is real difficult on children? Aquafina has daily conversations with her poop. To me, it is clear what happened here. They wanted to have a The Boys product while they waited on the 3rd season after the show hit insanely high viewership during the 2nd. So they created this in a few months in order to get some quick cash, and the result is really bad. straight to 27th with you, near the bottom. The good news is that the other bad stuff isn't actually that bad, it's just at least those shows aren't trying to ride on the coattails of a popular show and a few celebrities. The Boys Diabolical is simply a dead showcase of the struggle Prime Video has fought against relevancy. So what's this new money-making method that they came up with? Well, baby shows, of course. Take it away, baby, with a guitar! Intermission 1! Did you know Gary Newman is 13 days older than Gary Oldman? I gotta admit, I did have one rule for this video, which was that I didn't want to discuss baby shows that made me feel like I'm bleeding Cocomelon. That means no vision poof, which you should thank me about because this is how the show looks. What the fuck is that doing in the show? But there's a variety of cute educational shows in the platform, along with the shows created for general audiences without any real plot. In the end, I managed to watch 11 separate shows out of the 17 that could fit into this category because I swear I could not stomach those 6. I am not watching Do Re and Mi, not even on your time. Okay, well, maybe if it was a really evil person's time, but that's like the only situation in which I watch it. And even these are a box of chocolates, like Danger and Eggs or Little Big Awesome. These two have got to be the most nothing shows I had the experience of watching. It's just two constantly aimless shows with the same sort of "wowza, we're so awesome" vibe. And in the case of Danger and Eggs, I don't really care because it's just unimpressive in every way. The show's about two best friends who have daring adventures, but it turns out their over-eagerness gets them in all sorts of wacky hijinks, which the other guy doesn't want to be in because he's cautious or afraid of doing stuff. And then they are like revealed that underneath the park, which is where the show takes place, there's a whole secret society of psychedelic plants and creatures, and they throw a pride parade. Or I guess I should do it like the show and call it a peaceful festival of love. And yes, it's actually kind of creative, and it's really inspired by a bunch of cool cartoons I remember watching during my childhood, but there's genuinely no purpose to all of it. It's so standard and unassuming that the stuff you just heard me say is about the most interesting it gets. And also there's a giant chicken, that's also pretty interesting. Most episodes go by without shame or glory. The comedy isn't particularly complex, and the show's intro is like, a kid, an egg, a park, they do stuff, but there's more to it than that. It's kinda hard to explain. No, it isn't. That's about it. There's a few episodes where they actually have something interesting to say. At some point they genuinely discuss retirement.
I count the cracks in my vest.
That episode ends up on the old people being happy that a machine has replaced them because at least they get to work from home now. There are no mixed messages being sent here, I bet. I guess there's one thing they can't explain explicitly, which is they can't call the Pride Parade a Pride Parade because the investors at Amazon Prime would throw a conniption and the show is no longer available in their service. Oh, never mind, they just restored it. I'm also putting this on 24. But the other show is genuinely so disappointing because, Slime, look at this. I know it's borderline corpo style, but it also looks like corpo style with a soul, and yet they do nothing with it. The visuals are about the only thing this show does right, and then during the puppet show segments, the character who is literally a balloon full of goo gets turned into a felt thing with balls stuck to it. What? And it's not even that I hate the aesthetic. You've heard me praise Battle Kitty to hell and back. They genuinely just couldn't handle the pressure and made the most nothing show out of something that has one of the trippiest psychedelic sequences I've ever seen. And I'm not talking ever seen in a kid's show, I mean as a whole. The sun and the moon are played by Weird Al and Aimee Mann respectively. How am I bored watching this? Well, maybe because it's the kind of show where the intro song describes its visuals and then praises itself. You'd wish it was just the opening, but almost every musical segment in this bitch has embarrassing string of thought lyrics and composition, which really makes you feel like it's all just done to have as many jingling keys as possible. The show starts telling you that the two main leads are scientifically the bestest of friends, but they're just concerningly codependent in a way that's more creepy than endearing. And I guess that's only yet another example of the show taking something good about itself and overdoing it until it's annoying and boring. This happens the most with the gaming nuts they constantly do or try to do, because for the most part the nuts are just giving the characters random arbitrary scores like it's an Atari game. In 2018 nonetheless, where the highest score in the most popular game that year was 1. I'm talking about 1. This show is indeed one away from the worst at 29, which is kinda crazy to say. That does leave the question, what was the worst show? We're talking a show that I didn't like at all, but I still managed to find something about it interesting enough to discuss. And though I wish I was about to name drop a show that isn't a baby show, yeah, the baby show managed to be the one with the most missed potential. Tumble Leaf wasn't that bad by itself. It was just an exercise in pissing me off. Watching this makes me feel like an unflushed urinal, in the sense that like my job here was to take in the pee and soak in it and my distaste mostly comes from how intricately crafted the pee was. It is beautiful. The visuals make me want to like this show because not only is stop motion animation for kids dying harder than print journalism, the designs are incredibly appealing and I adore that the separation of the mouthpieces was baked into the design for ease of animation. Look at this hedgehog guy. I want to pet him, I want to be him with his friends, a lack of social ineptitude. The whole thing extends to the environments. They're so lush and autumnal, even going abstract sometimes. There's this episode where they go to a popcorn tree for some reason, and gosh, the visuals are amazing, which just made me more angry at the show, because underneath the art direction that practically teleports you into a whimsical autumn world created of the smoothest clays and finest furs, lies a show that is bafflingly confusing. Be honest, when you look at the show, what age gap do you think it's aimed for? Age gap, why did I write it like that? What age group do you think it's for? 6 to 10? Maybe 7 to 12? Wrong! It's aimed specifically at ages 3 to 5. Not even 3 to 6, just that tiny age group. Because this show actually keeps bringing up insanely specific spatial awareness phenomena that kids would hardly question until they're like 8, but they're also explaining it like at the speed you'd use to talk to a 3-year-old, assuming the kid doesn't have any sort of learning disability. We're taking ideas such as throwing a coin into a wonderfully animated stop-motion fountain and the coin reflecting back a distorted circle up on the wall. There's color theory stuff, or how approaching your own shadow makes it become smaller as you stop obstructing the passage of light as much. It genuinely feels like a baby show that alienates its baby viewers unless they have surprising observation skills. Any kid actually noticing the situations happening in front of them could probably use a faster explanation. And any kid who is understanding to the current explanation will not remember the show because their developing brain is still struggling to remember they've been weaned off from breastfeeding. Wow, that's very difficult to say. I know I sound like I'm being rude towards the babies, but remember, I'm being rude towards the show. In the modern era of children's entertainment, where educational content is buried under stacks of jingling keys like the last show I talked about, having a show like Tumble Leaf should be extremely valuable, yet something about the way it's built offsets that value. Every episode starts with a 2-minute sequence where you watch these poor crabs suffer before the main character finds the object of the week, almost as if they read children were prone to enjoy repeating patterns and so they pathologically began doing it. Everything about the show feels like that. It's also carefully designed to an unnatural extent that makes me, as an adult, hesitant to recommend it to children. The teaching method feels rooted entirely on formal studies and not at all on actual experience teaching children, which I remind you I have none of, so maybe I'm talking fumes, but also like literally half my extended family works on infant psychology. At some point I must have picked something up. Point is, this show being so pretty and having such a massive flaw sent it all the way to the bottom. I prefer a piece of media that's bad over a piece of media that could have been so much more. I like art, I make art, and I like when the art is carefully designed. TLDR, if you're arting while you hear me yapping, please send me whatever you make on Twitter, I wanna see that. Hey, at least all of these children's shows have something they're very good at, even for adults. Language learning. Because Prime Originals are licensed by Prime, these kid shows actually become a really good resource for learning a language. They're available in so many languages, and unlike the other shows, this one is like really pretty and slow, so it's really giving you a lot of time to understand more of the worlds. Which means I said to this one more than I would have otherwise. Some of these shows for kids are way better educationally than others, and I thought that was gonna be my main criteria to decide which shows I would watch more or less of. But then there was one show that really set out to show me why that was not the case, and that is if you give a mouse a cookie. What, getting fed up with so many children's shows? Because guess what? I'm the one who sat through them! If you give a mouse a cookie, then you get a rodent infestation, you ding-dong. Don't do that to yourself. It's constructed and delivered way better than Tumble Leaf or Little Big Awesome, but those shows actually are interesting to discuss. The Sentai show is just like normal. Charming little designs, nice teachings, and yet it's teaching simpler things with harder language, the way children's media was meant to be enjoyed, damn it! I know I just praised the designs, but yo, I don't like how the moose looks when it walks. And it also has like a chin testicle thing that I know is supposed to be like a tuft, but it just looks like balls in a figurative and literal sense. But yeah, aside from that, I don't have any gripes with the show. The format does get pretty annoying because sometimes they're trying to instill language upon the children, so they often repeat words. I see children under 7 benefiting from it. It's also not boring because they spent the right amount of time playing with the logistics of the fictional universe.
No signs of trouble on the horizon. Guess I can kick back and relax for a while.
Green Hill's looking a lot more like Sand Hill right now.
Ta-da!
The mouse will often need a more learned companion to travel around the world because he's so tiny, so the writers naturally force themselves to add some sort of character that appears reliable to both the mouse and the audience, whom will proceed to explain all the intricacies of life, such as, you know, how the whole Lady D thing was an inside joke. They also are constantly playing with the size of the mouse regarding the plots and the stuff that happens. I like the idea of the mouse being small so that the already small kid can play the part of the smart one in a way that the kids would be able to not feel talked down to. Just a bundle of clever solutions that were conceptualized by whoever wrote the original books. The show itself is just normal, and I slipped it at 28th. But by this point, I think you should see what I mean when I say Prime has struggled. Kids shows may be pretty meh, but they sure do seem profitable. I know I put them under other things, and they are quite bad because they're not really entertaining to someone who's looking to understand media, but it's like, it's aimed at children, and if we look at them as being aimed at children, they're definitely better. It's just kinda hard to separate the ranking between children stuff and not children stuff, and I do want to have a ranking because it makes a nice pretty number appear every now and then on the screen, and it pleases me. And to be fair, making kids shows does seem to be a pretty nice business strategy to just have a constant amount of viewership in some way. And the thing is, making content for babies is a lot easier than making content for kids, because when you make content for kids, you're kinda hitting to an audience that may not exist there. Like, kids are usually in YouTube and whatnot, so it's kinda hard nowadays. And so that means that you're probably never heard about any of the shows I'm about to talk about, even if they are good. May I interest you in the humble teachings of Niko and the Sword of Light? It's absolutely... Wait. No, Dink? I guess that means you aren't ready to hear about the third best show in the platform. Okay, how's about the 9th? Custom Quest! There we go, that's a good ding. Niko's got 3 seasons and is clearly inspired by shows like Avatar and stuff. I'm genuinely surprised I don't hear anyone talking about it. Custom Quest is a lot more kiddie in nature because it's pretty much about these kids in the 80s who find a magical costume shop that allows them to attain the powers of whatever costume they put on. It's the ultimate child fantasy! And the keeper of the store thankfully only stocks costumes for children. I say this because I'm genuinely wondering what sort of superpowers one could attain from the Playboy outfit. Also, this show apparently is based on a real video game from 2011, and apparently that game is really good. It has a cult following and everything, but I mostly care about the fact that you literally never even notice because the show wasn't created to market the game. I wonder if there's some sort of other show in the platform that I'll talk about later that commits this mistake 15 times in a row. Why would a bunch of children need versatile superpowers? Gnomes? Okay, I don't think they're called gnomes. They're spiritually gnomes, but they are referred to as repugnants. And their whole goal is to obtain power via stealing the Halloween candy, which they eat to power up. It's like if that one chocolate guy from SpongeBob was the whole thing. It's honestly a simple premise, but then, oh boy, the drama! There are 2, but less. This show follows 4 kids and the store manager, and I'm absolutely amazed by how the show handles the relationship between these 4 characters, because it generally ties their individual arcs and group arcs together in a magnificent way. If 2 characters get in a fight, they get in a fight, and they start learning and keeping secrets about each other, and that just makes the episode-to-episode interactions just a tiny bit more interesting. I really enjoy how these children are written, not only because of what I just said about how they each have something cool about their writing, and how each just tackles a slightly different coming-of-age arc from parent to sibling relationships, but also because they've got extremely good chemistry with one another. I mean, we just saw examples of shows where the main cast is a combination of a coward and a dynamo, and that combination doesn't really work. But because here they also took the time to create a thinker and a buddy, it evens out the situations that the writers get to put on paper. Yes, I use Tomodachi personality types to describe that, but it's true. There's a certain minor twist in the show that I adore because not only does it correctly pertain to a certain character whose arc is relevant to said twist, but it's also relatively well hidden from the audience, between little nods and somewhat subtle foreshadowing that you start to notice when you rewatch the show. Plus, I imagine a bunch of older viewers would relate to that character's struggles. But the kick on that whole relatable bit still goes to the children.
I'm looking for my family.
There's just a creativity to the concept that could have never happened if another writer was in charge of it. The kids turning into costumes means they recurrently get to slap a whole different design for them if it serves the scene's purpose, and I love how many different creatures they turn into, all with different powers and traits. They turn into bananas. One episode they dress up as policemen just to intimidate. There's a few times where a character dresses as the in-universe mascot for a local candy brand, and then you also get a variety of normal stuff like chameleons or a guy with big platform shoes or a radio, I guess. Did you think I was lying when I said they got creative with it? This is how you make a show for kids that appeals to all ages, because it's combining the childhood whimsy with the unique writing bits that make good shows like Gravity Falls super fun to see. It's very similar to Gravity Falls, but I do enjoy that it has its own visual and narrative personality, especially the way they use really interesting shading in the backdrops to make the entire show look moody and cool. And I betcha you are thinking that if the show is genuinely that good, so good that I'm calling it the first hit that I've talked about in this entire video at 9th place, why has nobody ever talked about it? You must have heard about it at some point, right? Critically, there's quite a divide when it comes to this show's reception, because the people who were familiar with the game felt betrayed by the show. The show only includes loose elements like character names and the custom power ideas. From the show, you'd never know this game is kinda like Persona in a way. But if you come into the show without expecting any of the game elements, it is pretty enjoyable. And it has a few fans, but not really enough. I pose the following possibility. Prime Video is the absolute worst at advertising! Yeah, that's what this entire video is about! I say they're notoriously bad at it. They're so bad, I can record more times a show in this platform had an ad for something else than times the platform showed me any show of theirs. If people knew about it before watching this video, it's probably because they saw a clip. Think Mark! One of the 20 scenes in Undone where shit just like happens. The sausage party comes in. Yes, it's real and we'll talk about it later. We basically let any scene from Monkey Kid speak for itself because wowee, those visuals! Which, by the way, Monkey Kid is not entirely a Prime thing, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Prime is almost incapable of ever marketing any show they make, which means that there's more hidden gems in this platform than there are gems, in a way that's honestly kinda sad. Okay, let's talk about one such example of a show they managed to somewhat market. Fairfax. Intermission 2! Did you know the 1979 hit single Chiquitita by ABBA was originally called In the Arms of Rosalita? God, this show aged like grandpa. I miss him. When the show came out, it had pretty good reviews and people talked about it, but when I watched it, I was very confused because it's just a constant stream of "Hello, fellow kids!" for like the entire duration. Maybe it worked well during the period of its release, but a few years later, the show feels like walking through a wasteland of early TikTok culture, old enough to be Musical.ly, even. We are talking a character asked to get a whoop whoop or dabs, only to be told by the other characters that nobody does that anymore. There's gonna be some modern day comparison I could make, but I will not bring it up to not further date this video. So you have these 4 teens whose entire shtick is following trends. So they follow the trends because everyone in the universe only cares about wasting money on brands or clout. Which means that what should have obviously been a pretty good critique of consumer culture around Apple and more obviously Supreme ended up being just your generic coming of age story with like loose surrealist elements. And also the main cast have the vibes of people who would earnestly watch Logan Paul, KSI and Mr. Beast. But I also kind of fuck with that in a way. The idea of someone who would earnestly watch Logan Paul, KSI and Mr. Beast, while plausible, also suggests this stereotype of someone with no depth or hobbies, as if their entire identity is to be as blunt as possible. And yet, this show goes out of its way in the midst of the quest to find the golden Dorito. It goes out of its way to put these smaller details showing how the characters do have depth and interests. They wanted to have a heart underneath the satire to reel back the jokes about how silly consumerism is, and focus sometimes on how that consumerism is a result of how difficult it is to belong in the current times where shit just goes way too fast. But then I'm just sitting there thinking the characters are not satirically endearing, just kind of annoying, like not annoying that I don't want to watch them, but kind of annoying. To make fun of Supreme, they made the characters obsessed with a fictional brand called Latrine. And it's supposed to be clever when it isn't. I went to the Walmart and bought some shit from an unflushed toilet. Aren't you in love with my clever satire of consumerism? This is like that movie Flushed Away. Aren't you in love with my endearing reference? That's pretty much the entire show's comedy. Yes, those gags were purposefully unfunny, and I think I have to clarify because I'm not ever sure if I'm ever being funny. So those are the jokes you're not supposed to laugh at, and the other jokes are the ones you're supposed to laugh at, okay? There are some pretty good episodes in there, and the show isn't so unfunny, it's not engaging, but the way the characters speak is just so 2021. It's so dated because they used real "hello fellow kids" speech instead of making their own thing. It extends to feel weird because there's two characters in the main group who are not black and yet they speak using stereotypical mannerisms, which at the time were more normal because people simply adopted them into the English lexicon, nothing wrong with that, but now with only about 5 years of difference, it comes off a little bit differently. I wouldn't say it comes off as racist, because at the end of the day, black people culture existing isn't in any conceivable way racist, but it is kind of unusual that the show uses this to kind of try to make the characters seem cooler or younger in a way. Heck, the show in general is weird because of that. Being brand obsessed in 2026 is a very white person stereotype. If you're watching this later, I bet it's probably now turned into a stereotype for some other group of people, just because we're just that good at finding patterns and feeling superior, aren't we? Let's all laugh at colorblind people! There's two weird characters who are clearly coded after black people. It makes the entire show feel obsessed with a specific culture it doesn't really belong to. I know one of the writers is called Ted Riley, but he's not the Ted Riley, and is in fact one of the main writers of the 2026 hit GOAT, a movie which people watching in 2028 definitely remember. Actually, I should shut the fuck up because I just criticized the show over this. I guess I should also mention that most of the music is actually trap, not hip-hop, and I know people who would hit me over failing to make this distinction, so here it is. But yeah, them three guys is white doesn't mean they can't write black characters or use related mannerisms, but how can I trust a show satirizing culture is well written when its own usage of culture feels phony? The only real benefit about this is, yeah, the soundtrack gets to be flamed sometimes. I'm surprised at how good of a variety they had between super famous artists like Donald Glover, Megan the Horse, and Pusha T, but they also have obscure peeps like these guys. And at least all of the surreal visuals are pretty cool, and some episodes like the one in the market are swell at discussing the subject matter, so I can't put it that low. I say something like 22 is in order. But hey, it is pretty ironic that Amazon expects you to watch the show about brand royalty being bad, based entirely on brand royalty to them, which you probably don't have because it's Prime Video. And it's crazy to me how many good chances at marketing they've missed over the years. Like, you know Bluey? You know when you threaten to cut someone if they can't tell you the name of Bluey's sister? Bluey is a huge show of which I've watched one episode to see if it was any good for learning French, and it kinda wasn't. But I betcha it hasn't been too long since the last time you saw a Bluey product. It's massive, and so it's weird that Prime made a pretty good Bluey-like and then proceeded to never make a single product or promotion about it. Beat the Cat is about a chill cat who likes music. The show is educational, but it focuses a lot on the creative expression side of education, meaning it has some pretty interesting messages, you know? Messages about creating music and art, discussions on how collaborating with other artists works, which is something I knew nothing about because look at my channel, and other such topics, including simple stuff like how you can use music for self-expression. And like, my only problems with this show stem from how it wants to be inclusive a la Checklist by just having one of everything in a way where it feels extremely shoehorned. I'm all for inclusivity and I ship the gay squirrels in the show very heavy, but then you got the French-speaking character who spams random words in French for no reason. Shut up, Emma! Everyone knows you're not from France, you're from Montreal with your sacre bleu and your trou de vol. You never say tabernacle a single time like the real Quebecois! And then early through the show they introduced a Latino character who is literally just a Latino stereotype, and I won't lie, it made me mildly uncomfortable. At one point, he doesn't comprehend that fucking Emma wants to paint a picture of him because she says paint, even though the word for painting a painting in Spanish is pintar. Plus, it's borderline comical how the character parents all have some sort of inclusive trait while the children barely do. And it's really just an execution situation, because they could have solved this quote-unquote problem by just spreading out those traits among other character groups. As it is now, it doesn't feel like the show actually cared about being inclusive, it just wanted to boast being so. But that's the hypercritical me, who is pedantic through life and gets angry when people tell me not to think about it because it's made for kids. If I take one step back and think like someone who has a normal job and maybe considers putting on this show for a kid, please never make me babysit, I am horrendous at it. Yeah, I think the show is good. They also spread out the main group to fit into different personality traits, which is going to ensure more kids have somebody to relate to. The frog guy bottles up his feelings and tends to fake being nonchalant. You've seen this in older people, but I imagine there's kids that also do this behavior just a lot more subtly, and it's nice to have a character that over-exaggerates this trait so kids can identify it since their early times. I wish my infancy shows had a character like the squirrel for me to relate to. I like it when kids shows have a specific topic to teach about instead of just random weekly lessons. Focusing so much on artistic education is something that I don't often see in shows like these. Probably because children suck at art. I guess most people dismiss a lot of those teachings on those grounds, and it's also true that most natural artists tend to figure these things out, but I appreciate plots like learning to accept more unusual music or separating your creations from those of your teachers. These are all genuine things artists must learn as they go, so teaching them at an early age could absolutely be beneficial if you notice a kid may be into art and crud. In fact, I enjoyed the episode-to-episode writing so much, I proudly put the show at 16th. Yes, it's for babies, but I was somewhat entertained by the writing, and being made very uncomfortable by the Latino kid constantly. The point is, this is in the middle of the shows from Prime Video, which I deem okay. Like it's not a hit, but it's also not a flop. It's orange, it's yellow. This is not the only show from Prime Video that actually decided to have a focus on a specific area of teaching. However, the other show is not about anything new or unusual because, like, it's incredibly common. It's so common, the VeggieTales did it. That's right, religious shows. This is the last baby show we talk about. I promise things are gonna get more interesting from here on. I just wanted to get the kid shows out the way now. And The Chosen Adventures has got to be the weirdest one of the bunch. Among spin-offs and reboots, you have the story of Christ, I guess. This is a spin-off of The Chosen, an insanely popular crowd-funded show dramatizing Jesus, and besides a few cameos, it seems the show has nothing to do with the original. But here's the best part, they're obviously not gonna show us like the crucifixion or resurrection, this is a kid show for God's sake. They can't actually show the cool Jesus storylines. It's weird because they are trying to be somewhat realistic with the whole bit where, the main lead girl is Jewish. She doesn't follow the Jesus religions, that shit didn't exist yet. They're out there making the kids learn religious morals that come from the Old Testament, which still makes sense because there's a lot of overlap, but I couldn't help but find it at least a little bit hilarious. It's kind of funny how she prays in Christian despite all that, by the way. So yeah, it's basically about this little kid. She has a lot of questions, her rabbis never answer until in comes this guy called the Rabbi. That's right, they avoid name-dropping Jesus to teach her his reformist ways, I guess. And then you'd imagine the big arcs would be Jesus story moments. I don't know, the kids seeing Jesus perform a miracle, or getting into trouble for suggesting certain ideas so the rabbis don't like. And that would be pretty unique and fun, but nope! Instead, the arcs we are getting are related to this random-ass sheep and chicken duo that follow the main character around and, talk about stuff. They show you the sheep's painful backstory and you're just like, Slime, relax! Where is the story? I spotted the art direction. For some reason, this show has fantastic art direction. Look at these colors and lighting. But when it comes to the story, I understand they can't play it straight, but I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I'd love to see an arc about the crucifixion, but toned down for kids. Just cause I'm all interested in how they would handle that. Give me the drama! One of the characters is this Roman kid, who has to be shown that having so much power you can abuse and scaring people is a bad thing actually. Slime! Give me an arc where brother has to contest against his father. I wanna see the kid getting TBY beat up for doubting Caesar and shit, and I don't care if that's mildly messed up. I wanna see that! I'd see that any day! Give me a whole arc introducing Judas, but make him morally grey by having him also teach good stuff to the kid, and then when he betrays Jesus, you'd be like, oh my god! He didn't just fucking do that, you get the gist. So pretty much, it's not particularly good, but good enough for 20th. Again, they got pretty normal religious teachings about morality, and despite being marketed as a Christian show, they're never saying you should specifically follow any Christian adjacent religion. Most likely simply to have a larger target audience to, reel in, I suppose. But yeah, the messages in the show are stuff like bad things happen for a reason, or that tells you not to jump off the roof for a reason. Who knows, maybe the idea of going more serious with it is actually better in theory than in practice, and I don't think the show would get any better if they actually did. It would just be marginally a little bit more silly to watch, which I guess is something unique to the ability to talk about this historical drama. Well, yeah, in quotes that, I suppose, but you get what I mean. This is something that couldn't happen if it was based on a famous fictional story where you have to adhere to certain world buildings and whatnots. Kinda like how Lost in Oz is. We're gonna ramp up the speed for a few of these kids' shows. This one's about this girl who finds a magic book that whisks her entire house into the land of Oz, straight from the Wizard of Oz. She's not Dorothy, mind you, but like her granddaughter or something like that. The result is that their version of Oz is more uniquely world-built than most adaptations. They're kinda forced to adapt the classic Oz story to newer technology, and nobody walks on yellow brick roads anymore, so now there's a subway on Oz, and it's the yellow big subway, I guess, or something like that. The Cowardly Lion's replacement is gonna grow up to be a thwonk. Hey, watch it with the hair! Whoa! Oh, hi, Angel Dust, it's been a while. Wait, there's 2 of them?! I bet you can tell just from the designs, but we do get a bunch of interesting new characters and antagonists to lighten up the show. And a lot of the locations are based on stuff from the later Oz books that don't often get nearly as much attention as the first one. Did you know there's a desert around Oz that, like, if you touch it, you die from depression? Like, you melt into sand or something. I love how they did it in Return to Oz, which, actually, when I think about it, maybe the show is more based on just that movie because nobody actually bothers to read the 75 books. Care to read Syzygic and other surprises? Because I might actually. Honestly, the show isn't too bad. I never felt like any part of it was incomplete. It does kinda have the vibes of that one Netflix movie, the one with— oh, no, God, no, not you per se. No, but just people. In general. Yeah, no, I wanna kill them. All of them. But you know that's just cause the character designs are somewhat similar. And I find similar thoughts regarding character arcs. Some are pretty tropey, like the classical magical girl who really wants to get good at magic and quad super fast, and so she's super edgy to her friends and whatnot. But I ended up really liking how this show actually punished and rewarded different aspects of that behavior. Ambition good, but chillax girl kinda situation. The parent characters have a good balance of caring for the children, the situations don't get serious enough, but they get a good amount of serious. Overall, it's the kind of story that works more than fine, and I don't think I would have mind watching more. But also at the same time, it's not really that entertaining. Sure, it's a cool concept, but episode to episode, the dialogue writing and whatnot doesn't work at all, which it's like the layers of show. There's the layer of show concept and interpretation, and then the layer of the show itself, which you've seen me touch upon this video many a times, and I'll probably do it again. But this is one of those situations where the ideas are really cool and interesting, but the execution is like a wet fart, or I guess a dry fart, since it doesn't leave a stain and you can still use the same one. There I go again, making piss jokes instead of telling you how this fits in 19th. Wanna know something that gets closer to a wet fart? Shows based on pre-existing franchises. And not like how this show is based on Oz the books, I mean something more direct and a lot more lame. That is, something like Angry Birds Mystery Island or Paws of Destiny. Whoa, a double ding! It's not even the first time it happens, but still, whoa, a double ding! I just don't want to spend too much talking about these because they're kinda similar and suffer similar issues. Even though I must admit, the Kung Fu Panda show was a lot better. Like, Mystery Island barely uses the Angry Birds IP, which is not much of a surprise considering Angry Birds pulled the slingshot on a Star Wars game and it took upon itself the Han Solo song curse, which it dictates any Star Wars related media that precedes the Han Solo song is worse than it could have. This is a coincidence I've noticed a lot lately because this goddamn song keeps popping up, it is taunting me. Now let's compare. In Mystery Island, we have 4 kids who catapult themselves into a deserted island for some reason. Then there's some lost adjacent mysteries that aren't really interesting, and if it wasn't for the pig character being me for real, this shit wouldn't crack top 20. Meanwhile, in Kung Fu Panda, you follow these 4 kids who together have this sort of dragon warrior role, and thus become Po's apprentices. Sure, the kids individually aren't particularly fantastic, but together and with Po around, they at least have the sense of progression and complexity. Po taking in apprentices? That's a good thing! In the full hero's journey, the one that often gets neglected over making a surface level analysis, eventually the student becomes the master. And this is an idea that's common in wuxia and Asian martial arts stories, which is why Kung Fu Panda 3 and 4 kinda attempt to have elements that point that way. It's a really hard idea to pull off because Poe isn't a character who presents himself very seriously or responsibly, and it makes the fact that this show went off its way to give Poe his own arc all the more than impressive, because of course he's not gonna lose the silly Poe charm just to become a teacher like his teachers who were all serious and stuff. So it's very nice to see how this character is figuring out how to be a teacher when he's gonna be a teacher that's very different from the people that preceded him. And this is a shame because, I mean, I haven't seen Kung Fu Panda 4, but I imagine none of this show is canon. Sure, maybe better for the movie, but I actually kinda like how this show does it. Character development in the Mystery Island show is like, oh no, found a phone and brain-read it until the battery almost ran out, and now the entire group is sad because they missed their homes, and so they use the phone responsibly and start talking with each other and appreciating nature. The Kung Fu Panda show keeps introducing interesting side characters who fit into the canon of the films, maybe not perfectly, but you know, to an extent. There's this princess character who has the classic ignorant princess needs to lock in character arc, but the execution's not so bad, like you could see it in the French Revolution and you wouldn't be surprised. And there's also this group of warrior ladies, the kids kinda go back in time to meet the previous wielders of the power, so they introduce quite a bit of backstory surrounding them, and that makes it more interesting for the audience. Like, everybody knows they're not going to challenge the brilliance of the antagonists from the first two films. Actually, no, let me take that back. Of Kung Fu Panda up to 3. Even they went at it crazy style. This show not standing out for having a bad antagonist in comparison is kind of a big situation. At one point, Wukong shows up, like Wukong from mythology. The straight up man monkey fella, whom we'll discuss when we talk about that other show. And here's a massive asshole here, as he should be. The main antagonist too is actually pretty entertaining and manages to haunt the narrative until their eventual reveal. So it's all around a complete story. I must say it, the 4th movie should have been more like this show. Should have been more like the Kung Fu Panda Paws of Destiny show. And I know that's bold from someone who just confessed to not having watched the movie. But I don't care, my hubris is immeasurable! Push comes to shove, I'll just blame past Nate, it's a notorious idiot. The extended cast of Angry Birds is just random creatures they find. Was there even a real antagonist in this bitch? I don't remember. None of the world or topics from Angry Birds even show up, so it ends up feeling like a random show with the Angry Birds title slapped on top. But see, both are kinda similar unnecessary IP-based shows, it's just that each does things better or worse. The Kung Fu Panda show, I mean, obviously because of budget they can't call Jack, so they have to get Mick Winger to do the voice, and he does have an incredible Jack Black voice, but it's not the man, you know? The Angry Birds show actually has a really fantastic set of voices for the main cast. So even though it sounds like I'm calling one show Stack and the other one Trained, it's more like they're both okay at different things. Neither are the Mega Man show, whatever that means. I definitely meant another show, but I forgot what show it meant. I put one in 15th and one in 18th. All things considered, hey, at least Prime has managed to keep these IPs and the shows on their platform, because there's another show that was exclusive until it wasn't, because, yeah, Prime smart. The latest Rocky and Bullwinkle reboot just so happens to be 30% lost media apparently. That's not literal, but it's extremely hard to watch the second half of the show, especially because it was so unpopular that I swear to fuck I couldn't find it legally. I find the finalist few episodes in a Hindi dub, but in all honesty, I don't know Hindi. Wait, I understand the Mega Man line now. It was supposed to say Megamind, like the piece of shit show. I remembered, everybody. I remembered. Back to Rocky and Bullwinkle. It's a shame that this show is so hard to find because I was really enjoying the bits I could watch. It's about a moose and a squirrel that mess around and never find out. So I was expecting another shitty reboot with unweighted dialogue, but now I'm like, kind of a fan? It's still a deeply unserious and generally pointless show when it comes to the actual substance, but audio, I genuinely liked what I could watch. There's something to be said about a show that is genuinely witty. Even if the jokes weren't laugh out loud funny, and even if occasionally for like a few episodes I may have been distracted by all the backtracking I was doing in Metroid Prime on the background screen. Just having entertaining dialogue is such a massive part of script writing that almost never gets a mention. Though, okay, I admit maybe also Rocky being cute played a bit of a part in my bias, but I genuinely think they did a banger job with the script. It's not even just the two main guys, I genuinely found myself attached to Boris and Natasha, even if they're antagonistic forces. They're just plenty funny and have silly over-the-top accents. The story here is really weird because Each 4 or 5 episodes are their own little arc where Rocky and Bullwinkle participate in a random story trope. One time it's a bake-off, and then they're secret agents, and then they're rock stars, and then they're a creature feature. It's just generic stories on purpose, and it's not like they're parodying or subverting those story tropes, they're just doing it with enough energy and wit to make them fun. Also helps that every arc has a celebrity that shows up like, holy moly, it's Weird Al again! And also Gordon Ramsay early on, which genuinely confuzzled and bedified me to the point I had to pause the episode to hold my head whilst I chuckled to myself.
I am shitting myself.
Then you need to wear diapers. You shouldn't be shitting on yourself.
Are you okay?
So that's why it kinda super omega sucks that they didn't have the rights to the show they themselves are producing. And you understand if it was like, I don't know, She-Ra in Netflix. They got the She-Ra license and made a whole show in the midst of a time where they were pushing to revive the IP, and now Jared Leto has an actual decent role in a movie. Who, in this comedically flatulent planet, genuinely thinks to themselves, we need to make more Rocky and Bullwinkle. Let's trade the IP to a studio that's gonna bury it the second investors no longer care for it. Like, I can see the concept, but I don't see the vision. And this is not the only time it's happened. It happened with a massive show in their platform. So, unrelated question, have you ever fumbled your crush? Because between the show and the rights, Prime Video is out here becoming the biggest fumble of, like, streaming. And nothing exemplifies this more than the absolute disaster that is Monkey Kid's relationship with Amazon Prime. Intermission 3! Did you know? 1 horsepower does not equal the power of 1 horse. You know when I said Prime Video has 9 good shows? That was a big round lie. It's only 8, and it was not my lie, it was the wonderful lie by Amazon Prime Video themselves! When I thought about making this video, I was watching Lego Monkey Kid. It's a simple show based on the question, what if Journey to the West, but Lego? Turns out it's cleverly framed around characters in a modernish time setting, which means that, you know, if you ever have any questions, it's very easy to suddenly explain mythology whenever it's necessary. And the show kinda made me want to make this entire video because, well, observe. Yeah, no, the animation in this show goes insanal by sanal. It's the knees of the beast. It tickles my pickles. It rubs my knobs. It is the same studio that made Maya and the Bees somehow. To be fair, this studio has made like a third of the things you've ever watched, probably. The action scenes are gorgeous, but even beyond that, they're so good at the shape and compositions. The Lego designs are simple enough that they basically get to abuse all sorts of cool camera angles where they nail the perspective and shading of the characters. Even if the story wasn't good, this show would still be an absolute treat to watch on that alone. The plot's about this noodle delivery boy who somehow, for many circumstances largely related to him fucking around, obtains the staff and powers of Sang Wukong and goes, hell yeah, we're doing a sequel. That says the monkey over there, that is Wukong, and if he's doing something for ya, wait till you see Macaque and the Tumblr post they do about them. Why did I sneak this into the start of the plot explanation? I don't know, Procental Gyros thought it was important. Mr. Wukong decides to take the kid as an apprentice under the name Monkey Kid, which coincidentally happens to be the guy's actual name, MK. You will notice the title is spelled all quirky and wrong like that, but nobody conceivably filed the incorrect patent, okay? As I just mentioned like 10 minutes ago with the Kung Fu Panda show, this is actually pretty clever because it fits into the Chinese hero's journey where the teacher becomes the teacher ed. This all actually follows through with the rest of the characters and themes because, yeah, sure, initially it seems like another Spider-Man coming of age story. Random kid who is just like you happens to win the magical lottery that forces them to learn how to wield the power and their responsibilities, and the first season does turn that way, but it develops into its own personality quickly enough. For example, I love how every extra character the secondary characters, that is the formal term that they created for these people, they are all really complete and they all have some sort of part to play in the show, right? These people that surround MK also end up being saddled with their own portion of MK's responsibility and the growth that comes as a bonus, including any sacrifices that it may entail. I know it was probably just a convenient excuse to have the parallels to the characters from the original story, but it's a unique approach you don't often see with other superpowered people because they always go with a classical one-bam shangalang where, oh, we're trying to hide the secret identity and we're only gonna help them through supporting them, I guess. In Monkey Kid, at least they develop towards interesting directions, though I wouldn't call them unexpected. The original Sanda, you know, the guy who gets periodically stabbed by 7 swords in a sand river of pure uncontrolled pain, is just the blue guy now. And he likes kittens. and then it's like there's also a pig. Mythologically has a rake, he now has a spoon. Tank, he's like a successor to the super smart monk that like everyone was trying to protect in the original mythology, and he knows all of the mythology, and now he's some nerd who's named after a powdered juice brand. And finally there's Mei. She's absolutely awesome as a Jade Dragon counterpart, but since she's MK's best friend, she's also kind of on a whole other level. The amazing part being that the choices these characters make, and MK as well, oftentimes actually have an impact on future storylines and affect the show. MK's choices define the narrative as they should, but so do his mistakes. And both of these are crucial towards the show's themes. MK is a funny character because my guy is not an idiot, but he does commit so many mistakes, from dumb stuff to big stuff, and I like that his logical intelligence and emotional intelligence are completely different. Besides, they knew that he was like 18 or 19 or something when he got the powers. It makes sense for him to mess up and screw around a lot of the time. He's not naive, but he's got growing up to do, and I feel like that personality trait was amplified because it can highlight the theme, the very backbone of the series. It's all about how generations don't respect each other. The very concept is grabbing an old story and slapping it in a modern setting. It could just be a gimmick, but it's weaponized to showcase the good elements of narratives aimed at Gen Z with the good elements of older narratives. JMC's got this fame for being fast and chaotic and maybe not thinking things through, and a lot of that is just because Gen Z is younger and a little bit more hyper because they need to do a lot more things if they ever want to have a chance at having a house, but I think it's also related to how Gen Z grew up with a lot of complex narratives, so we're able to quickly grasp storytelling, and thus the pacing of the show aimed at us has really amped up. Gen Alpha does not count in this equation, they do not have media comprehension. Still, that recklessness makes it rather easy for older people to think that Gen Z and beyond is stupid. And don't make fun of them because most of us Gen Zers are gonna think Gen Beta is stupid when we're 40. Such is the way it works. The young'uns think the old'uns are antiquated and have a difficult time adapting to new technology, even if they're sometimes wise, while the old'uns think the young'uns are naive and in a mission to ruin humanity. Newsflash, the ones ruining humanity is the billionaires. Bunch of stuff like that. It all comes up into the balance through the characters. You get MK representing the new generation, and he does do everything fast. He's all screamy, maybe has ADHD. Definitely has 3 separate father figures. Do not let the other LEGO protagonists meet him. They all combined have less. Meanwhile, Wukong is still a prankster, but he's nowhere near as silly as he is in the source material. He's all jaded and prefers to remain secluded in his monkey mountain to monkey max and play with the other monkeys, enjoying his best bachelor life in a way. He's asexual, you know? This break was sponsored by the bird guy. Look at them! Look at them! I think the idea is throughout the story, the older Wukong has to learn to trust the kid, while the kid must also learn to parse and interact with Wukong's wisdom. This is all really cool because a lot of that happens because they equally learn to admire parts of each other. Currently, we are in this culture where respecting the elders is often an immovable duty expected of everyone just because age could come with that privilege. And that's simply not the best way to look at it. Earning people's admiration and being willing to give it, regardless of age, should be extremely important in order to attain trust between us. And you may think, oh well, but that's just the theme of their arc. But this theme still appears with the rest of the characters, who all have to deal with different aspects of their bloodlines, from their journey to the West inspirations to their parents. But you gotta admit, it's a really awesome theme for a show that's literally presented like Gen Z speed. This is a show that I feel some people would watch and think, whoa, that's too much, that's too fast. I watched it and I loved it, except for the final season. I just remember, which I didn't watch, expecting them to make the seasonal special, they always do. I guess they didn't do it this time. I should watch it this Saturday, and then when I edit this video, I can add like a footnote and like spend a whole day adding a footnote. Yeah, being realistic, I don't think this was a thing they did out of choice. You know, it is true that they could be trying to appeal to the younger demographics who would presumably be buying Legos and not stealing from old people, but the reality is, I think this all just happened because episodes had to last freaking 10 minutes or something like that. Slime, this show reminds me so much of Infinity Train, where I could watch a season in a day and I would always be sad watching Infinity Train because why was it so short? At least here we get to have specials that extend the seasonal length from 100 minutes that it would last to just over 2 hours, which is a lot more decent, but I can't deny it's still far too short. I mean, I have no actual idea what they actually wanted to do. For all I know, it is on purpose to make the episodes so short, just so they could put more animation in it or something. I don't know. I don't think it's likely. Whoa! I almost forgot to talk about the antagonists. The antagonists in this are loaded. I don't want to get spoilery with it because there's a few in here that are surprisingly good twists, but the fact that they remain compelling and extremely menacing is definitely a standout. Two of them get mild redemption arcs, including this character that's evidently inspired from Zuko in Avatar, down to the abilities, and I like him quite a bit. Not just because he is funny, but because they also know how to use his redemption for main plot developments. It makes him more than just a Zukozoid by taking him to the next step. Actually, he's kinda more like Sahir, the bald fellow who people forget about, even though he's like the best antagonist in Avatar. Slime people didn't really watch Korra properly, did they? But see, this is a good show. This is a number 2 best show. And it turns out, fuck you, despite being number 2, it's not a Prime Original! No! They marketed it as a Prime Original for a while, but the IP belongs to Lego, and the, well, then exclusive streaming rights belong to Amazon Kids Plus. It's an Amazon Kids Plus original! This is one of the stupidest Lego-related marketing decisions I've ever seen, topped only by the geniuses at Pricks and Minijix. Holy shit, those guys suck. I'm only including the show in this list because when I watched the show, it inspired this video, and I wanted to talk about it, and I was so proud of how I noticed the whole generational tolerance theme, and yes, I am very excited about getting to talk about all that, but sadly, this is not a Prime Original show. They simply had the streaming rights, and in fact, no longer do. Nothing was animated with Prime or any subset studio like Amazon or MGM and all that, but still, what did Prime say? It is our animated original, which is a little baloney, and I should have suspected something. I knew something smelled fishy because of how difficult it was to watch the show in Amazon Prime Video over here in Mexico. They did some weird shenanigans with it and didn't even have the English audio version around, which means that I had to watch the show in less than legal means as a result of their negligence. They didn't care apparently, and I guess that's because it wasn't their show. It was animated by some studio for the Lego brand, and I imagine they wanted to do it so they could market their new toy line, which I hear is actually very good in quality and details. It must sell tons in China considering it's tied to Journey to the West so much. Thinking about it, I believe the show is where most of my knowledge from Journey to the West comes from. They did a banger job covering all sorts of interesting demons and situations from it, which is why I felt entitled when Nessa 2 was good as a movie, because I knew who that was before y'all did, thanks to this show.
Give it up for second place!
I enjoy myself some Asian culture, and as someone who does that, you know for sure that I have strong opinions on Solo Leveling. That's the new way to say shamefully that you watch anime. Maybe a crappy segue, but not as crappy as Amazon's attempt to get into anime. I think they've gotten quite good at picking up licenses, but they're often not exclusives. Dororo was a TV airing, City was a TV airing, the upcoming Ghost in the Shell anime is going to be TV airing. This is normal, and always very confusing because a lot of anime may not be streaming service originals, but they do have the exclusive license, and I never know if I want to count them as original or not over that. Luckily for us, Prime is so bad at choosing what to produce that they only have 3 original anime they own exclusively, so I might as well touch upon them. Heck, turns out one of these 3 is in the 9 bangers I mentioned, and that is not Blade of the Immortal. When this came out, it was one of the first time streaming services tried to make an original anime. The other time was Neo Yo-Yo, and the result there was wonderful, and people really misunderstood it. Anyways, this one's based on a manga where most of the positive criticisms come entirely from the art direction. You know, people like the art here. And where the main character's name is written with a symbol of peace that got perturbed by the Nazis. Slap my salami, the guy is called Manji! A symbol I should be able to show you without getting nuked by YouTube because it's not a swastika. And I don't think there's any problem with the character being called Manji, being that he is immortal, and in the text it makes sense for his name to be a concept. But I'm not sure they picked the right show to adapt as their first original show marketed outside Japan, especially when they don't have a lot of budget to make it like justice to the art. Lots of people have no idea that the manji means what it means, so by adapting the show, they're opening themselves up to be misinterpreted, while also signing in a project that will be incapable of satisfying audiences. In all fairness, they did change the symbol in the character's design, but it still doesn't help. The story isn't very nice. It's a classic revenge story about the immortal and some girl he meets going off to kill the same guy because he killed their families. I don't think it would be bad if the pacing wasn't an absolute slog. I remember watching this back in like 2020 and being bored to bits. For years this was the only anime sitting at my dropped in my anime list page that I could actually watch more than 3 episodes of. And I figured it couldn't have been that bad. I mean, yes, I was 5 years younger then, maybe Senni didn't work on me, but JoJo did, and Prison School did, and Inuyashiki did, and Dorohedoro did, and Working, aka the first anime I watched in 2014 did. Yeah, no, the problem is that this show is kinda boring. Being honest, I did find myself more engaged on a rewatch and managed to watch it through, but then I began looking for my own thoughts on it and came up blank. Because despite taking 2 weeks to watch it, I had already forgotten a large part of the plot. At some point there's a bunch of tertiary characters doing stuff and I couldn't bring myself to care. I remember the scenes because the direction department is actually top notch. Art-wise it looks like an old anime and often uses very dark grays for its palette, which looks, awesome. How can I forget the several assassination attempts through epilepsy attacks? The show keeps flashing lights on you whenever anything supposedly shocking happens. Stop it, my eyes hurt. And also, it's impossible to forget the opening where the guy's putting his whole pussy into the worst English I've ever heard. And also, the song is quite literally banger. I could imagine an incredible cover of it. There's a lot of things that should have narrative weight that didn't. I remember the story feels both rushed and incredibly sluggy. And sure, some characters and episodes are pretty interesting. I wouldn't call it a show nobody would enjoy, but there's certainly episodes that can put you to bed.
You may not rest now, there are monsters nearby.
24th place. There's an anime that's worse, but also not really. See, this show is weird because it can pull off any narrative payoff properly, not because storylines are left hanging, it's more so that the big moments aren't given enough time. But they are given impact, so I'm kinda left hanging on whether this one's a 7 or a 6. Meanwhile, the other show, it does not crack the 6. Here comes Shin-chan spinoff. It's a bunch of small storylines involving Shin-chan, this fuck-ass kid you see every now and then. Apparently really popular in Japan, and my favorite anime director, Yuasa, has handled like several things about him. It's really just about this kid with a potty mouth whose dialogue consists 40% give or take of sexually harassing anyone with breasts. I knew my guy was known for being like that, but seeing it in action is really awkward. I seriously cannot overstate how much the joke is supposed to be that Shin-chan is a perv. I had to watch one of the old 1992 episodes just to see why he's like this, and it's insane how fast I clocked in that he was flanderized without having ever interacted with the franchise yet. So because this is a spin-off, each season follows his family inserted into different fantasy storylines. One sci-fi, one's adventure, one Seizure Japan. You get the drill. The idea was to get Shin-chan out of his typical setting and see what kind of jokes and storylines they could do with that. But also like, that's just the status quo for the character now. It's gone so long, it's now got movies and spin-offs and who knows what else. And that's not to say the show is unnecessary, it's more so to say that it's nothing special. The jokes were about as funny as a fire hydrant, the story was about as expected as me bringing up Cloudy with a chance of meatballs out of nowhere because I want to talk about this aside, that's for another video. The characters are supposed to be in a real stake situation and then you have Shin-chan who's just fucking around, which makes him kind of a detriment to the narrative. Everyone is one note in an attempt to showcase their big trait from what I assume was the original show, and they just keep going with the butt jokes. At least it was pretty entertaining because it was sorta weird, better than the Boys Diabolical, but that's about it. I'm gonna slap it in 26 and talk to you about an actually good anime, or I guess several animes, but they're all part of an anthology. By far the best anthology in Amazon Prime. Hey, you know what? This is a good time to go get a snack, so go get a snack. Fujimoto 17 to 26 basically is an adaptation of a bunch of one-shot short stories by Fujimoto, Chainsaw Man creator, and apparently they're good. It's weird to say because I think Fujimoto is actually a great storyteller. Res Arc and Look Back are clear examples. Brother is such a good storyteller, I'm not actually sure he's actually a guy as he says. But if there's one thing I know for certain, is thank you. Smash tomatoes. Smash tomatoes? Because, you smashed those tomatoes? Oh yeah, this ending is genuinely such a shame, and I'm an anime watcher, I wouldn't know, but it did gain meme status for a reason, you know. The last we know of this person is this showing, which reflects badly on them because through these mini stories by their own brain, it's very clear that they're genuinely awesome and well written. So it's like These 8 episodes, maybe they aren't all perfect, a few of them are not that good, 1 or 2 are confusing, there's one in particular I don't like because it implies some really strange shit. It's peculiar, because I think this is just a bucket of random writing ideas that they wanted to illustrate and just did. And so what turns out is that you get a very interesting anthology series, because even if not every episode is amazing, they're all unique because they all have different characters and messages and settings and themes. It's not at all golden, but it is definitely like silver, tier below. Okay, so it's not netherite, it's diamond, that's a good way to put it. Wait, but what if you're one of those people who plays beta 1.8? Forget it. Episode titled Love is Blind, and it's about this guy who wants to confess to his crush, but the world is ending, so I don't know, I guess the world doesn't want him to confess. And it's like, that episode is meh, but at the same time it's also very comedic, and despite having nothing but 20 minutes, they managed to make a compelling character in an interesting scenario, and then they take unexpected decisions. In 20 minutes they managed to do what many shows struggle to achieve in several seasons, which is at least very admirable. My favorite of the stories, I think, was Sasaki Stop the Bullet. I think that's entirely thanks to its incredibly strong message and delivery. The art direction is so immaculate, you could call it a conception. The actual story itself is that a guy believes really fucking hard that he can stop a bullet, and it just happens to work out. Bullshit, I've been asking for teleportation for a really long time. Where are my superpowers? But see, it's all a metaphor about giving yourself the chance to do something amazing, and that makes the message work. There's one called Nayura of the Prophecy, not the Samadhi type, and I think it's got links to Chainsaw Man, pun not intended. I was told it has, and I don't want to spoil myself, but hey, I liked it quite a bit. I have quite a lot of fun quoting the main character when she goes murder, destruction, kill, we're all Yankovic mutilation, and that's supposed to be like the wholesome message of the week. Sisters, this is alternate universe look back, because it's a drama about art, but this one features 2 sisters who draw each other naked for various plot reasons, which I'll be vague about just to mess with your reaction at the absurdity of the statement. But see, all rivers lead to Rome, all roads lead to Rome, everything leads to Rome, Rome is everything. The reason why this anthology is so interesting is because there's a layer of chaos to Fujimoto's stories that makes you want to dive into his universe. And I don't just mean that because I like the episode with the mermaid and the kid that magically can survive playing Panda for 9 minutes and 12 meters underwater. Like, one time I dove 4 meters and my ears still hurt from that, so you can't call that a realistic story or a story that's very logical, but it is a very unique and heartfelt story, so I think it gets a pass on not being the most perfect illustration of realistic writing. I have this episode here where this vampire guy is really bored about life, and it's like, brother, Smash Tomatoes channel videos are right there. Entertain yourself for like half a week or something, I don't know. But yes, there's that one episode I didn't like, and that episode is Woke Up as a Girl Syndrome. And I don't like it mostly because it sends me so many mixed messages, it's a mega mix of them. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it, and please ignore this cut that has nothing I've ever referenced for any sort of secondary Yap channel. I don't like this episode because it feels transphobic. This character, throughout the episode, I'm thinking this was about trans visibility issues, and it should be a good story about that. It revolves this guy, wakes up one day, turns out he's now a girl. That's just a thing that happens in this universe. I guess it also happens in this one, because people do randomly go, hold up, I'm girl, / I'm boy, / I'm neither. But in this episode, it happens literally overnight. So it's a good idea for a short film about that issue, especially in Japan, because Japan does not know what to make of their stance on queer people. So having a Japanese person make art about that is exciting, but then I'm not actually sure this episode is about trans issues. It sounds like it should, but when you actually watch the episode, the message more seems to be about gender perception and making fun of this idea that men shouldn't have traits that are socially expected of girls. Like crying, because boys don't cry like in that one Q song. So it feels like this episode frames being transgender as a bad thing, as if the main character was sick, and it ends on the character rejecting their girl body, figuring they're actually a boy that will never change. I mean, maybe I could interpret it from the other direction, a girl who figures she prefers being perceived as a boy, but the entire episode is framed around this guy turning into a girl, and they got a girly room, and people always used to call him a girl, and all sorts of shit that I've heard trans people go through. So it feels strange that this episode ends on such a note, and mind you, it's not to imply Fujimoto is transphobic or anything, I'm just making a point of criticizing how the episode is easier to interpret as an anti-trans thing rather than a pro-trans thing. The reality of genderqueer people is that by not adhering to the binary as biologically presented, they get to experience an entire range of identity that could involve, say, someone who feels more comfortable with the body and emotional sensitivity of the socially expected woman while still identifying as a man. My complaint here is more about the story failing to commit with any such proper explanation. It needed more time to be clear about what it meant. I don't know, maybe I'm just having so much media literacy I look back into having no media literacy. But hey, at least that's what? One episode in 8 that I could misinterpret, but it's still good? That's what we call a good track record. Maybe Taiga has been Fujimoto all along as well. Sure, I'll rank him. Trans rights, Love is Blind, Murder Kill Nuclear Explosion, Chicken Bacao. How the fuck does this piano still work? Vampiro, Alone and Look Back. Shot through the heart and you're to blame. Especially because out of the 3 Prime Video anthologies, this one is standing next to 2 horrible ones. Fuck it, officially this is one of the 9 bangers I mentioned at 8th place. So I'm bothered in the base of my butthole as to why they did such a horrible job with marketing this one. People are still learning that this exists every day because there was not a single ad, and talking about ads, do you wanna know what show they actually decided to go ballistic on marketing about for some godforsaken reason? Secret Level had a Concord episode. That was one of the episodes of Secret Level, an advertisement for Concord. The game that for the last 2 years, maybe more, has been the piece of shit. The absolute laughingstock of anyone into video games. And yet, it is one of the better episodes. That pisses me off. That pisses me off so much because the sort of IPs that they covered, because every episode here is based on a video game, they aren't bad themselves. It's just maybe not the right stuff to pick in order to make a good short story anthology based on them. Full disclosure, there was only one episode I actually liked, and that was the Honor of Kings episode, because it focused entirely on the Honor of Kings lore, and so it was interesting. I didn't even know what the IP was, so I have no idea why they even chose it. I may have had an idea, but okay, maybe not for Honor of Kings. I feel like that's one of the few exceptions. But at least the rest of the IPs were definitely chosen because the people making this anthology wanted desperately to copy the marble that is Netflix's Love, Death and Robots. They tried with the Boys one, but that was more just an anthology series. I don't think you can compare it to Love, Death and Robots, whereas this one was literally marketed as, oh, this is by the people who made Love, Death and Robots. Which are the people? We don't fucking know. You may not be familiar with me, but Love, Death and Robots is like one of the best things in the entirety of Netflix. The 15 things in just the animated stuff. Even if some episodes were really bad, there's also some that are so good they offset the entire series into being extremely entertaining. Not to mention, it's always fun to just delve into an anthology with several different stories and they're all completely different and you don't know what sorts of fuckery you're getting into. But that's what makes it the most interesting. They immerse you into a universe momentarily and you just can't beat that feeling. So what Secret Level episodes did I actually feel managed to immerse you in their world? I think the Sifu one is pretty good, because Sifu itself has an interesting story. You play as this guy, you beat up people, but every time you die, you get to upgrade yourself and return a year older. Your goal being to get to the end of the game by dying the least amount of times. That concept is so unique that you couldn't have made a bad short with that base. Second one that was okay is the Pac-Man one, because it's such a bonkers interpretation of Pac-Man that you are not able to believe your eyes. It's like if 10 Million Fire, it was also blatantly an advertisement for Pac-Man Labyrinth or whatever they called it, and that was a real game that existed, and apparently it was real bad, but it's still ridiculous that they made an episode for it here, and specifically because it's just so out of left field that I wish the game would have been good, because I would have loved people playing Pac-Man, but edgy, and in the big 2026, but no, they didn't want us to be happy and live in an interesting reality. And then the other episode I enjoyed was the Spelunky one. It was real short at like 7 minutes, but let me tell you, it's more about being a roguelike than about being Spelunky. I mean, I agree, it's nice to see Spelunky, which is a game that looks like this, reimagined into a pretty nice looking short with graphics that differ a lot from the original look, but this short doesn't really use Spelunky, it's more like the roguelike elements are the plot of the episode. This episode could have easily been about, I don't know, Enter the Gungeon, Dead Cells, stop clapping when I'm recording. But hey, I'll take Spelunky since it's a unique IP, it's miles better than most other IPs they selected to make into an episode. Fucking Dungeons and Dragons? I mean, I understand why, it is a massively popular franchise, but the thing about D&D is that it's generic fantasy by design. You're supposed to engage in the story because you're playing it with companions and you're reading each other's character sheets and having fun for like 3 or more hours that each campaign lasts. Fuck it, maybe you make a campaign that lasts 500 hours. Just sitting down and watching the middle of a story happening for 20 minutes feels kind of pathetic. It will never be entertaining. They did an episode of New World. This one's okay, 6 out of 10, but who the fuck is playing that game? Oh wait, it's published by Amazon Prime. Looks like yet another ad. The only show Amazon has ever made marketing for is the show that's just an ad! There's a Warhammer 4000 episode that really spells out the massive issue behind this show. You know what? I give this episode a pass because I know Warhammer fans. They're insane and they know the lore of their story. I don't know how they know that shit, but they do. Somehow, they get a game every year and they manage to play it. And I imagine Warhammer fans probably do enjoy this episode. It's just not easy to get into it as an outsider because like it's summoning you into the middle of the lore. And it's a big lore. I haven't gotten the time to get into it like a bunch of people have, apparently. So it happens with every episode that I'm very lost and confused without being capable of enjoying them to their fullest. Because every episode was made for fans of those franchises, and thus an outsider coming in is left with nothing but confusion and a forlorn attempt to squeeze out a few extra sales. And the more time passes, the more you realize every episode here was intended to be an ad. Like, I originally wrote a part of the script about Crossfire, and I was like, oh, that episode's really cool because they're talking about this IP from 2007 that nobody has talked about in years. And guess what they just announced this year? That's right, it's just another ad! Hey look, another Wilds episode, yay! Wait, no, that's its slave cousin, Outer Worlds, aka the one I don't want to play on stream, but you should join me so I can play Outer Wilds, please. I look at this episode, don't get what it's putting down and go like I'm Bugs Bunny. And all the while, you have this horrible last episode that just makes up some Ready Player One bullshit they came up with and is unrelated to any game. But seeing how every other episode was an ad, I wouldn't be surprised if this was an ad for something that got canned during one of Microsoft's 700 layoff rounds from the past 2 years. I mean, I hope all these games that got an episode are super good, but realistically, there were so many potential games that they could have picked up to make a great anthology episode. The picks they went for are very samey, and they're kind of expecting you to have some prior knowledge when that shouldn't really be the case. They should have picked shorter stuff that less people knew. And I don't just mean thematically, visually, that's a huge thing to have missed. Every episode here kinda looks the same when it comes to vibes. Whereas in Love, Death and Robots, one of the coolest things there is that episodes go widely through different visual styles. Suddenly it's a 2D episode, and then you got a 2D one with dumb designs, and then this one uses great sound design, and then Secret Levels got like a realistic 3D one, a realistic 3D, a realistic 3D, realistic 3D, cel-shaded 3D, realistic 3D. Thematically uninteresting, visually uninteresting, and then the episodes are just made for people who already like the games except for like maybe 4 or 5. And it does kinda scare me because apparently a second season is in the works and you know it's all gonna be ads. So let me take you to Fantasyland. If they wanted to make better episodes, they should pick better IPs that could benefit from the format, and not just IPs that are similar to the shit you see in Love, Death and Robots. Adapt Silent Hill PT into a short. Adapt one of those FNAF spin-off books, have a musical episode inspired by Sayonara Wild Hearts, give Tenjutsu some visibility with an anime-style episode, Dave the Diver, American Arcadia, thousands of titles with outstanding art direction, and in the middle of that awesomeness, you can sneak in whichever IP you wanna market and everybody would be more receptive of your Gears of Wars and your Ace Combats in the works. Yeah, easily the 23rd spot. But can we roll it back for a moment? Me try to speak back. I mentioned Dungeons and Dragons. What do you think would have happened if they actually spent the time on it? Amazon Prime Video actually has an answer for once? Vox Machina and Mighty Nein are one of the most recognizable Amazon Prime shows, barring... which is still a bit away, hang in there. These two shows are based on Critical Role's D&D campaigns, which I honestly knew nothing about before I started watching this. They last like dead as 400 hours in total, but this show is just the raw story presented as a show. And is it good?
Yes.
There's constantly stuff about the show that I didn't adore, but at the baseline, it was really solid. I think a lot of the stuff I didn't like either had to do with the show rushing through massive moments near the end, or random characters being introduced while the main cast is just so strong and fun that it makes everyone else seem kinda super lame. In both stories, you follow a bunch of misfits who end up banded together and they all make a really good team, so they start becoming more infamous little by little. For the sake of brevity, I don't want to spend too long talking about Mighty Nein. It's so far got one season that I liked quite a bit more than Vox Machina's first season, because, I don't know, I feel like the plot flows better and I enjoy the characters a lot more, but it's still at one season and I don't feel like it's fair to compare it with most Prime shows, but their cores are similar. It's just that there is a level of dissonance between the characters in Vox that's nowhere near there in Nein. And what I mean by this is, I don't want to talk about Mighty Nein right now. Because it's just everything that Vox is, but done better. Sure, it's got different themes and characters and whatnot, but without getting into the weeds of it, Snoop Dogg, get out of the house! Out! I definitely feel the same DNA, and I totally expect it to outpace Vox Machina soon enough because it's just less messy. Regardless, we're now talking about Vox Machina, which is literally getting a new season as we speak. And it's like, what do I do about that? From my point of view, the show's dead, over, finito. And now it's getting a new season, which I could care less about, especially because last I saw, the show left up on a pretty sour note, but it ended. I'm afraid of getting into this new season and finding out that the show's being stretched out because the campaign was popular enough to have a third arc. And I'm sure it's gonna be fine. Again, this show has a baseline level of quality, but I really hate watching a narrative get stretched out. I'm completely unfamiliar with the sauce, but even I can tell that they kinda rushed to adapt the end of the current arc that they were adapting and then finish all the character arcs, even though the actual campaign continues on for like another 30 or 40 episodes. So it's kind of weird that they try to adapt the character arcs to fit into less time and into different scenarios, and now they probably don't know what to do with them, so they're gonna have new arcs that are gonna be kind of weird and out of character. I don't want to talk spoilers, but there's one thing about the show which peeved me a lot, namely the idea that every character in the show must end up romantically entangled with some other. And I'm not talking background fellows, I mean just within the main cast. I don't understand why, and it's made a lot worse because of the main problem with the cast, being that they're almost from entirely different branches of fantasy each. One's more gothic, one's more fae. It makes for a very unique cast, but they also don't particularly mend in a believable way. Instead of being different races, they're just completely different continuities, and that's a problem Mighty Nein didn't have, at least not in its first season. Aside from that though, Vox Machina kicks back in ass. Sure, the characters don't feel like part of the same universe as a group, but as a group themselves, there's some quality in there. I think the source material being what it is meant that every character would eventually get some amount of attention, especially regarding major arcs and big, moments. They give Mr. Wood fuck a guy, but were never ever daring to show that on screen an arc about his sex addiction. The big strong guy, Grog, one of my favorites in the series, 10 out of 10, would slap his breast. He really gets an interesting arc about emotional strength, which is fitting because he's the strongest in the group, but he also gets this arc in a portion where the characters are dealing with stuff from his backstory, so his development felt as important as it should be. It works thematically, but once again, because the campaign was hodgepodge together initially, a few of these themes are all over the place and some characters who get their big moment have to rush through it as a result. This fella, Pike, sick design, sick abilities, sick voice acting, which is part of the curse because the cast of Critical Role is all loaded voice actors anyways. She's kinda wife, isn't she? Pike is the cleric of the team, so her whole arc revolves around her fate in a holy moly light called the Everlight, and the more fate she has in this universe, the stronger her magical powers are. And then as the story goes on, the Everlight stops helping her out as much, so she has to realize the strongest faith she can have is faith in herself or something like that. This is a huge moment in her arc. I like how the religious character has to learn she can't rely on asking some deity for help all the time. Sometimes you gotta do what you can if it's stuff you can control. But they kinda skip over this. Like it's a thing that just happens in the span of 2 episodes, and despite her entire self being based on fate, she just seemingly decides to go, I renounce God, I am them now! Maybe not that literal, but it's still such a massive thing to state and then move on like it's apples and salmon Meunier. So there's a bunch of little things sprinkled about on there, where you get big details that should have a lot of impact on the story and arcs, but they don't actually because pacing bad, so you're left there wondering what to make of them. Because it's a messy show, based on a D&D campaign by people who had to readapt the story into the newer lore they created like 4 campaigns later on, I don't know, maybe 700 episodes or something. Campaign this, campaign that, and champagne? Nowhere. Anyways, I'm tired of that term, so now I'm calling it story mode. Luckily for us, the mess isn't as important to us in this scenario because the show is, again, extremely high quality. An immersive setting, complete character arcs and storyline, emotional fight scenes. That's what's making it enjoyable. As an adaptation of a story mode, it struggles, but as a standalone retelling of the story, I fuck with it, minus some pacing issues in the 3rd season, and that's why I gave it 7th place, with Mighty Nein at 12, given it's still got like a few seasons to go before I can decide whether it's fire or straight ass. With 1 season, I already see it's more memorable in scenarios and characters, but the group mends with the universe a lot better, even though there are 8 guys and not 9 like the title says. Because one of the guys is German, and so he says 9 a lot, and that's why they're called the Mighty Nein. Even though Germany doesn't exist, but I guess German does? I don't know, it's real funny, laugh! What an enjoyable viewing experience, and I think it must be related to how the show is just taking itself seriously in a straight away form. In a way you don't really see happening with other shows here except for... It builds a world, puts characters in it, and you spend time as you see them genuinely struggle against this universe, even if one of the characters is called Bags, which sounds like an innuendo. They're just mature stories. Not for adults mature, just they have an emotional maturity that makes them stand out. So let's talk about those shows that don't stand out. I already went through the baby shows, but what about the adult shows? The Rick and Mortys, the BoJack Horsemans, which actually, well, that's a great name for a band. The Kevins. You couldn't hear the ding because it was drowned out by the impact sound, but it was there, I promise. This is the newest adult animated show about animals being crass and gross while the show pretends to have emotional maturity that it doesn't have. And you're in luck I'm talking about this because I literally learned about it while making the video. I've heard horrible things about it, and to be fair, it is not that awful. It does get quite a bit worse during the second half, and it does kind of bother me that this show could have been something extremely interesting about intimacy and this current landscape of loneliness, but it just doesn't. Story follows the titular Kevin. He's a house cat. In this world, the animals are both conscious and also still pets, so they're like getting intimate with their owners, I guess they can talk. And then one day his owners get divorced, so he's cast away into a weird found family at an animal adoption center. The whole show is kind of framed around this idea that he's just left a 10-year-old relationship, and also that he's like 30 or 40 if he was a human. Fuck, that's so close on being interesting. I love the idea of exploring intimacy and picking someone to trust from a non-sexual / romantic perspective. Not just because ace people could relate, that's just a neat bonus, but also because it's an aspect of intimacy that's rarely discussed. People don't bond on such a deep level often because it's just not socially expected, but I think everybody needs someone like that, someone to listen to your problems and have fun with, without, getting sexual about it. Yeah, no, the show literally makes more mentions of Kevin's prolapsed ass. Again, there's an inkling that this show could have been great if they somehow made a second season, which is unlikely because Amazon Prime didn't market this one, but that second season would have the potential to be a genuinely amazing show. But for now it's something like a 6 and they'll probably never do anything better with it. Kevin being 30 means a lot of the plots revolve around him trying to find out what he wants to do in life. With the help of the other animals in the shelter, he may be able to figure it out. Those other animals in the shelter, they definitely have some potential. There's this Pink's cat character whose plots I actually kind of fucked with. They're so used to being independent that, being able to rely on someone else starts to get difficult, and then they're getting on an actual romantic relationship with another animal. But that animal has an owner and they don't know if they want to be owned and also have a partner, a specific topic to this specific universe that they've created. There's this episode where Kevin follows the cat around and they do crazy stuff in the streets of the city, and she's like protecting him from all the wild stuff because he's kind of ignorant about that, and I can't lie, that was kind of wholesome. My favorite character is this super adorable cat called Ruby who has every disease on the planet, and she's always animated to have pus and bile coming out of her face. I thought she was going to be annoying and disgusting, but then she was actually super endearing and I found her so funny. Kind of a shame that they eventually just took it in a weird direction by having her fall in love with a cat who also has every allergy, and it also turns out that's her brother, and it was just kind of gross for no reason in a plotline that ends up leading nowhere, except to indirectly tell disabled people that they're only going to be understood by people with the same exact disabilities. So it peeves me off that the show is always in the border of being decent or even good, only for the entire second half to rely on terrible gross-out comedy and some incredibly cringy moments. Oh, the animals are all quarantined, so now there's pus and mucus everywhere. Oh, they go to a rich person's party and they do disturbing shit. Oh, Kevin wants to be hip with the kittens to get over his ex-owner, so he starts Hello Fellow Kidsing them, even though the kids are already written to follow Hello Kids standards, so on and so forth. Just a big ol' waste. 21, but I sincerely believe that if they keep it going for another season, if the writers lock in and actually talk about their setting and characters, they could have something great. They could go higher in this rating, it's probably a lot easier to go down. Good news on that front is that you cannot go that low, the Boys Diabolical exists. So let's go up the ladder to spot 14th, a relatively recent show that came out. What do you mean 1 year ago? What? Is time real? What do you mean it's the 19th of June? HBO got a show about a Christian family. Netflix had one about the Jewish family. And looking at this, Prime Video said, hey, I want some of that pie, it looks tasty, please let me have it and eat it. So they made #1 Happy Family USA. Yes, the title is clunky, but that's on purpose. And this story follows a Muslim family, because the Buddhist family is probably somewhere deep into the bowels of Crunchyroll. And #1 Happy Family is actually surprisingly different, but Amazon Prime didn't market this one, because who would be interested in watching a Muslim immigrant family living in the USA in September 2001? Such an interesting concept, am I right? Could you imagine being labeled a terrorist by everyone you know over something someone decided to do halfway across the globe, and they come to do it in your house and now they hate you? Assuming Bush didn't do it. No, for real, I'm amazed this concept wasn't done before. I expected to see a Family Guy clone, and what I got was a good absurdist comedy about the expectations minorities in the US put upon themselves to avoid any potential of being seen as culturally inappropriate. They have a sheep! Their pet is a sheep! But see, the crazy title, the over-the-top intro, the absolute paranoia some characters have regarding being profiled, the way the show uses absurdism to portray an aggressive and sudden code switching, it's a little too much, but in a genuinely witty way. I personally laughed and saw easily 400 jokes that I figured would make Muslims laugh. Full disclosure, I am no Muslim, but I did often get the feeling that some of these designs and situations were designed to be Muslim stereotypes, but written by Muslims, you know? It's not bad faith stereotyping, more like it's showing the more ridiculous aspects of Muslim culture. It works really good thematically, it juxtaposes. I am juxtaposed. I imagine a lot of minorities would be able to relate to this one. There's a balance that's expected where one's meant to be proud of their culture, but also avoid being profiled as quote-unquote one of the bad ones, but I feel like maybe the show gets a little too ridiculous at times in ways that distract from the message, and all to do gags that may have been better if played straight. Like, good comedy needs to know when to hold on the comedy and when not to, something I feel this show didn't do very well. Is it funny when in episode 1, 9/11 happens and immediately the police starts taking in anyone who speaks Arabic? Yes, kinda. Is it funny how they spend an extended amount of episode on this kid trying to pirate a mixtape for his teacher, so they call the FBI on him? Okay, maybe not. But I can see someone laughing about it. And shoutouts to the showrunners for doing that one episode on the tenor test. Sure, it's a little bit of an awkward watch, but like, it's crazy to me this is one of the first times I've ever heard talking about this when it's so weird. TLDR, I recommend it very much if you follow Islam. If you don't, I still recommend it, just a little less. 14th. Now it is time to introduce the #1 most unfairly judged Amazon Prime show. I don't know why I didn't just look for a sound effect, but I'm too committed to stop now. The second best hospital in the galaxy. This is like Prime's inside job. Streaming service? Check. Cancel too early? Check. One of the best in his respective service? Check. Endlessly compared to Rick and Morty? Check.
Can't believe Jeff Bezos is dead. And right in his prime.
Holy, this show is always compared to some other show. Fucking stop! It's just Cribs, it's just Rick and Morty, it's just Duke and Birdie. If it has so much DNA from so many things, it gains its own gosh damn personality, you ding dong!
I got so angry, my voice is now 1 pitch higher. It's me, Nate Alien Sweeps Orb. It is similar to those other things, but it's also its own thing. It follows 2 super surgeons called Sleech and Clack. Everyone in the show is named something stupid like that, so get used to it. And they work at the titular hospital doing alien surgery. Sleech is the comically genius character. Like, somehow she always knows an obscure study on a random condition. And it's very easily funny, because every patient is an alien, so they often have some form of ridiculously comedic disease with a comedically ridiculous solution. Such as a guy being green, and they need to be turned inside out so they can be blue, dabba-dee-dabba-die. Meanwhile, Clack isn't book smart, she's street smart, and her arc revolves a bit about her romantic life. Not to mention, the relationship between the main leads itself is also very endearing. It does remind me of Tuca and Birdie a little, so it's not like the comparisons aren't fair, it's more that, for some reason, people refuse to engage with this show at a serious level, it's always through some other show. Like, the main plot of this story revolves around Sleech finding this anxiety-sucking virus that she begins researching to try and solve anxiety as a problem. Specifically because her mother is a famed psychiatrist who's made her entire career out of exploiting her daughter with her crippling anxiety and, you know, she's just making studies and books. How is there no video essays about this somewhere, Skreek? We get so many emotional moments and explanations into anxiety in a genuinely meaningful way. Yes, in the middle of a completely unserious medical drama, but that's almost precisely what makes it awesome. It's lighthearted. That's a good thing. Slime, I love this arc about overbearing parents dealing with conditions and disabilities. So many parents to millennials onwards have tried solving these conditions by any means necessary, as if it were actually a solvable problem. Medication and medical studies and whatnot. And I'm not saying those things aren't good, they most definitely are, but oftentimes it's treated as if it were the flu that you can just cure with medication, instead of a thing that has to be thought to handle. At some point, you can just put more medicine into a child so they calm down and begin functioning like a normal person. That's simply not how it works. And thus this overbearingness has caused ramifications on their lives. I feel like nobody ever talks about this topic because it's easy to get up in arms and pretend the arguments are somewhat against medicine and treatment entirely. And that's why a show about this could be endlessly positive. Meep meep. Wait, no, that's not an alien noise, that's a roadrunner, whoops. But okay, let's step away from that for a moment. The universe and extended cast are also entertaining. I love all the quirky little sci-fi moments, even if humans never show up alive. The wacky and crazy nature of the society feels incredibly positive when, despite all the dark humor stuff happening around, they somehow have the technology to deal with the issue. It's a unique look into a positive future, even though humans are just a minor part of it. Meanwhile, the extended characters are entertaining. You got this beard guy who, par for the course, of course I'm into. He's got like super puberty, so he's funny.
I like the cynical nurse cause she's got good voice acting.
The directors of the hospital themselves are just two conjoined heads. There's also this whole other corporation that runs the actual best hospital in the galaxy, and the characters from that group are also pretty amusing, and so on, so forth. Despite not competing at all against the Netflix stuff, this is still solid, and I totally recommend it as a hidden gem. Even though, well, it's not actually the most hidden gem in Amazon Prime Video. I'm putting it in the 5th spot, and I suspect most of you may already know what's gonna be on number 4, but number 3 is definitely the crown for the biggest hidden gem in the platform.
At this oh, my voice is back, yay! At this point, we're 5 hits to 19 flops, and they still haven't talked about 4 of the hits, so it's gonna start sounding like maybe Prime Video actually markets its shows, and I assure you, this isn't true. So let's go one step lower and talk about a show that marketed itself, and by complete mistake. In the history of Amazon Prime Video, there's only been 2 times an episode needed a warning. One time was with The Boys Season 3 Episode 6, titled Herogasm, and it follows the boys going undercover into a superhero orgy where shit goes south and a substantial amount of gore violence happens. The other time was when Frank the Sausage from the animated film Sausage Party, voiced by Seth Rogen, jerks off a human and gets a facial. Intermission 4! Did you know? Turtles can breathe through their butts. This is different from humans, who tend to talk out of them. Don't catch me lying to you. Sausage Party Foodtopia is not all that deep. I think I mentioned earlier in the year that I watched a movie, and that was because of this show. I couldn't watch the show without having the context of the movie, and what surprises me about Sausage Party as a franchise is that it manages to create genuinely impressive scenes through the stupid framing of sentient food that humans can only interact with if they sniff bad souls. This silly franchise manages to be hilarious every time because it's always aiming way higher than it seems, and so despite the show objectively seeming relatively weak, this is the funniest show on Amazon Prime Video. This is the only show that put a scene so adult they had to put a warning. This is the only show where there's a wonderful war scene between food factions, including war crimes. This is the show they chose to critique capitalism. None of the other shows here do it. But I think the gods of Amazon are scared of me. But Sausage fucking Party Foodtopia did it. So the show doesn't continue the movie, which ends on a teaser for a second film in which the food would presumably travel to the real world to fight like their voice actors. It was supposed to be real meta, and I would have liked to see that. Instead, we skip over to the food having won the war against the humans worldwide, and now they have to figure out how to build society with their food. This is honestly so funny because every single team they got to build is some sort of banana goo versions of the real life concept. They got a banana goo economy, banana goo housing so the foods run rot, banana goo entertainment so the foods don't get bored, banana goo politics, and most importantly, banana goo wars. I wouldn't call it a poignant critique, but it is super entertaining, and they sometimes do ridicule the real life concepts in a way that aren't necessarily clever, but they like got a point. I can't pretend real life doesn't sometimes feel like a bunch of sentient foods trying to figure out what the fuck they're doing in a way that benefits them, even if it's at the other's expenses. And this is Sausage Party, the sentient foods having sex franchise. This is the one who went down this route. This is the show that actually kills major cast members. It's hilarious because it's unexpected. It's beautiful because it's beans. There's a part where it rains and the foods are like dying because the droplets are falling on them and it's killing them, and I'm just sitting there trying really hard not to make a JoJo Part 9 reference. And then Season 2 goes one step further. After Frank, voiced by Seth Rogen, I remind you, has become the human's boyfriend, the other foods are angry because he gets along with the Humie, that's the racial slur they made for humans. But Frank is trying to use the Humie's strength to put down more housing, more refrigerators, and it ends up with the foods exiling the main cast, so they walk away and eventually get to this utopic food society that's actually figured out how to make it properly. They got a real job market and an actual council for each food group in the city. And given that Frank and Paul's like liberated humanity, they want to give him a spot at the table, but they overlook the fact that the sausage cannot read. They have to teach him to read. Sausage Party teaches its protagonist to read And this is not just a joke, by the way, it has narrative importance. And this whole season revolves around this society using humans to fool their operation, and so the humans end up going to surrounding cities to eat the foods there in order to survive. I don't think this is clever, but why does it feel like it is? Like, how often do societies exploit the resources of neighboring countries to further their own? How many wars begin because of that? How many times have you seen that being explored as a mecha fight where a sausage and a jar of mustard, with sexual tension between them, get up inside the mecha's assholes and make them fight even though the mechas themselves have a crush on one another? You see what I mean? In the stupidest way possible, Sausage Party did it. Why? Is the fight choreography good? I'm not going to pretend the animation and lighting is the best I've ever seen, not even from an animated film based on a show, but there's certainly moments that look incredible, animated sequences that work out and look professional. Heck, even the lowbrow comedy pun with hilarious characters like Melon Gibson and Megan Thee Stallion managed to work. Because the show is so ridiculous and dumb that every few things that they decide to do are gonna come out of left field and be stupid and funny. Again, this show's not a masterpiece, but I gotta put it on 6th. It's one of the bangers. Licensed shows are regularly worse than their movies, and here I am waiting for season 3 of Sausage Party Foodtopia, and not because it was so bad it's good, but because it genuinely pulled it off. We live in that universe, the one where one of the best things in Amazon Prime Video is in fact Sausage Party for some reason. I guess I've seen this happen with other media, and that's mostly superhero shows, where oftentimes the show is regarded as even better than the comics and whatnot. And you know, Prime Video should be quite familiar with superhero stories. 2 of their biggest shows in their entire platform are superhero stories, so I think it makes sense that they decided to make 2 Batman shows. That's right, 2 of them.
What is this?
It's a streaming show, Batman.
I don't get it.
What is there not to get?
Why do they look like that? I mean, look at his chin. It could have its own gravitational field, and it also looks like a shoe. It makes no sense.
Well, you see, they are cartoon versions, stylized drawings of the popular Batman characters. The purpose is to appear in a comedy sitcom aimed at general audiences.
What are you, some kind of nerd? These guys are more fatherless than I am.
You're the one here who is constantly less threatening than his antagonists. Wait, what the fuck? They did that shit to me too?
Here they are, Batman, Crusader, and Batfam. I bet you can't tell which one is pretty good and which one's kinda mid. Yes, Batfam's the mid one. Crusader is inspired by the old cartoons, so it's mostly episodic and doesn't really change much on the Batman formula. A bunch of freaks show up on Gotham, Batman fights them, more freaks show up on Gotham, nobody knows if Batman is a good guy or bad guy. The Penguin is now a chubby lady, and every other antagonist does not have the staying power they usually have in Batman. Like, they try pretending that it's not immediately obvious who Dr. Harley Quinzel turns out to be. I mean, I understand trying to separate her from the Joker, that is a good approach, but she isn't really memorable, right? So, aside from the chubby lady Penguin, the most memorable antagonist has got to be Two-Face, since we see his whole transformation and arc, and his friendship with Bruce Wayne is also pretty solid. I mean, Batman tried to, it turned Batman into a sitcom, and not too shabby, but also not too good. The Batman family is cobbled together from random places from the franchise. Batman and Alfred obviously are there, but then you also got Batman's biological son, which he had. And you know, don't worry, Batman's childhood trauma will not be addressed in this show, even though you got the perfect platform to do it. Anyways, also we have Polkana, which was adopted by Bruce Wayne because she dove into a rejuvenating bath of acid, and now she's 12. Then there's Ra's al Ghul. He appears as this antiquated ghost grandpa sort of character with a Russian vampire accent, even though his name is literally in Arabic, and his suit is inspired by Egyptian relics. I think this voice actor just messed up his accents or something. And finally, there's also this random estranged uncle character, Man-Bat, or the Kirk. That's the real name of the character. Sure, Crusader is a little better because it's an actual serious show, whereas this one's just a most likely made-for-profit sitcom. But also, like, Cape Crusader is not really adapting anything from Batman that's a little bit unusual. I mean, I do enjoy seeing a more inexperienced Batman, one who has to learn what compassion even means. Like, at some point he has to save Catwoman, and that's a big character moment. But notice how I keep bringing up the same famous kind of characters. Firefox shows up, that one's different, but besides that, they're not creative with it really. Whereas Batfam actually took the time to bring up characters that I don't entirely know. Asterisk. I do know the characters, but they don't tend to have major roles on mainstream Batman stuff. I imagine they showed up in the 90s show because, I mean, the 90s show apparently did everything right, so it's hard for these characters to not return in some way, but I do like that they picked a variety of Batman villains and anti-heroes to fill out the cast instead of just picking the same old guys from the same old franchises the way Cape Crusader did, but oh, they're trying to do some sort of twist as if absolute Batman doesn't exist to like take a dump on all your attempts at twists. It's kind of a shame that in Batfam the characters they pick don't really work. Batfam is a serviceable show, it does its job, but they don't really feel like a good sitcom cast because I can't imagine a fun dynamic with most pairings. Sure, Batman and Batchild work because, I mean, Batman is a character who is most interesting as a father, but I can't imagine Ra and Alfred having any chemistry together as characters. There's no instances where Mrs. Alfred's niece, who is also a major character, can come in and add something amusing to the conversation. And that's the magic of sitcoms. The characters are designed to play off one another in funny ways. They need to have someone come into the room to shout about the benefits of smearing mustard on your butt cheeks or something stupid they saw on the news. With a cast that has no natural chemistry, the highest possible comedic value is super limited, and the story doesn't make up for it either. The plot is pretty much that Bruce Wayne and Batman have settled down, Gotham is now about as dangerous as regular New York, and Alfred's niece has an organization to make Gotham villains nice, except there's a random mind control device going around that makes them evil again. There's definitely some arcs and a rather predictable twist, but the core of the story is weirdly separated from Batman's canon. It's like a cardboard version of the real story's theme and visuals. Gotham is nice, Batman is a responsible father figure, the Joker is still better than Jared Leto's. I am left bedazzled, surprised, and a bit amazed. But I don't think I'd recommend that. I'm still putting it at 17. It's like, it wasn't bad, but I wouldn't recommend watching it, you know? And so, there were three shows left, 3 bangers left. 3 hours on me procrastinating to talk about each because it's kind of a tall order. In the last 40 minutes or so, we've seen most of the service's bangers, and I'm going to get glazy up in here, but please remember, I had to slog through a bunch of mediocre shows to get here. I hope you're enjoying this video and all that. Oh, you want me to say it? You want me to say it? No, I'm not gonna say it. Okay, I'll say it for you. Please like the video. So, let's start by the most petite of the orders, a show that's better described by you looking at it. So may I ask you for a moment of your attention if you're looking away from the screen? This is Undone. Look at it. Point me towards the direction of any other show that looks like this. Okay, no wait, Netflix did its Band of Brothers clone with his style, but that one's shit and this one's dope. That one uses a style filter, not AI, while this one was painstakingly rotoscoped and the results are absolutely wonderful. Netflix's show was using the filter for literally no reason, just for vibes I guess, while this show depends on its animation style. It's paramount to the topics of the show and its story. It's basically about this girl, Alma, and she discovers she's got magical powers that let her basically travel to time and space. It's very much, it reminds me a little bit of Legion, the show. The one with the guy who is superpowered and they tell him, no, you're not a psychic, you're psychotic, you're C from the hit single Open Gangnam Style, when that isn't true. So it's very similar to that, and at its core, despite being a show about Alma's fabulous superpowers, this show is still just a drama about Alma's life. She too cries sometimes. I say, although a lot of the drama does hinge on that, the fact that she's experiencing the powers and doesn't entirely know what's going on, let alone what's real, there's also an element of her figuring out what's in her head, the losses she's experienced, the little peculiar bits that have been present in her life. Heck, she doesn't even know if she's just real high. For the most part, she leads a normal life. A mother, a sister, she's even got a partner. The most terrible thing that happened to her is that her dad left early on. He went to buy cigarettes or milk depending on the age rating, crashed into a ditch and died. It turns out the dad does appear, apparently has the same powers she has, and it's implied he left to research those powers before he died. And so Alma is now trying to travel back in time to that night and bring him back. You know, the fact that the powers are a good balance between plot element and plot driver fares really well for the story, and the powers are used really cleverly in the show, but it's true that there's some sort of divide between their usage in the first season and the second. It's like the show is actually 2 layers of show. Yes, I see that the dad is played by Bob Odenkirk. You may play the song. And I personally fucked really hard with the first season, while the second one was more like the cool extra bonus you get when you buy one of Kathy Mitchell's copper pants. The first season just has something the second couldn't. In the first one, Alma's powers are written a certain way. Like at the start of the show, she gets into a car crash and then her dad shows up, tells her she's got the abilities, and she starts exploring them when she awakens from the car crash, you know. Meanwhile, everyone who is still alive is looking at her doing all sorts of strange things. They think she's losing it because she may have gotten concussed or developed schizophrenia or something. They're worried she's crazy, and also because, I mean, the dad has the same powers. He would have displayed some of the same signs of schizophrenia as she is doing now. And so the entire first season is playing with this idea of the powers maybe not even being real. She could just be experiencing psychosis. It's interesting because she wants them to be superpowers. She wants something about life to make her have meaning as a person, some sort of destiny or direction. She doesn't just want to exist and have a cookie-cutter life. She's looking for meaning. And maybe the meaning she found is not real, just a delusion. Sure, it sounds nice to have powers that are gonna take you to wonderful places where you can see beautiful stuff and, oh, you can also change fate, but also not very likely, not realistic. She doesn't know if they're real at all. The first season then ends up with the answer being left up in the air. It's up to you as the audience to conclude the story in whichever way you find satisfactory, and this isn't problematic or lazy because they literally only leave you 2 possible outcomes. She does have schizophrenia and she needs to deal with that, but also learning to love her life for what it is, or they are actual superpowers and she should pursue whatever destiny that is. And the entire concept of the show hinges on this. Do you think Alma's life is more fulfilling if she has some sort of cosmic plan or not? Maybe almost just important because of what she is now and what she means to her family. And then in comes the second season, and it has no choice but to immediately, right off the gate, like 3 minutes into the episode, pick an answer, which dictates what's going to happen in the entire season. I don't want to spoil what the show decides on because, to me, the first season as its own layer is kind of a masterpiece because of the framing. Everything that happens in the story gets turned into this question of whether it's psychosis or actual powers, and so everything is more engaging. Engaga. Point is, you as the audience get to choose what the show is about. And that's why I recommend you watch season 1 first, let it stew for a bit, and then go on to watch it season 2. I don't think this show would be as high if I didn't have the time to sit and ponder and consider whatever happened in the first season whilst I waited for the release of the second. And I agree the second season is also pretty good because it has its own set of interesting visuals now that it doesn't have to tiptoe around the answers. The animation itself is still incredible, and this is easily the most interesting looking show in Prime. And it kinda sucks that they'll never do anything like this because I doubt it was profitable. And you can't blame the show because it's entirely on Amazon Prime's shoulders, because once again they did nothing with the marketing. So I think it's time we genuinely talk about the king of Prime Video didn't market me. Niko and the Sword of Light. Countless times I've heard people say they want a show with the comedy and character style of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, but with a competent ending. As many times I've heard people say they want something that reminds them of Avatar or Samurai Jack as cartoons capable of delivering storytelling.
I knew that you knew that 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 I knew that you knew.
And a complete inverse of zero have I ever heard anyone praise Niko and the Sword of Light. And for you, that's about to change. I mean, I do kinda get it. The art style looks kinda cheap and Amazon. But also, it surprises me that nobody ever talks about it, and the most likely reason is simply because Prime doesn't even let people upload clips of this show to protect the copyright. You don't market it, you don't let the fans market it. They're essentially hanging on somehow every show they ever make, having a scene as iconic as Think Mark for... The story follows a humanity that has been trapped inside an orb by the evil Narest. In order to fight against him, they create this super warrior power that simply recycles itself on repeat, meaning a champion is taught to fight, sent to Narest using the energy of light, which manifests as a different weapon each time, and when the champion dies, all their memories and experience go back into the next vessel, which drains until sufficiently strong. And then the story starts when the crystal for the energy is found, broken, the newest hero comes out underbaked, and so the Princess of Humans has to go teach the champion because he's 11 years old and probably doesn't even have object permanence. Immediately, the stakes are super high. If the 10-year-old can save the world that a bunch of 30-year-olds who came before him and had more experience couldn't, what's he supposed to do? The Crystal Age shit went kaput. This is literally the last chance they'd ever have to actually defeat Narest, making him a fantastic antagonist. And if Niko, the protagonist, fails, it's the end of humanity. And yeah, sure, such stakes do make it ridiculous when Niko, the 10-year-old, I reiterate, is just fucking around. Because the show still has a lighthearted tone, it's almost in the name of the show, and it helps a lot to create a contrast between the stakes and Niko's attitude. It makes it make a lot of sense to see the princess be so unsure as to what to do, and most of all, it's a writing decision that basically carries the entire concept of the story. If Niko wasn't a kid, you couldn't give the main message of the story about coexisting with other species. You'd have a grown character that's not entertaining to see, and most notably, Niko's entire personality would be gone. Niko's got so much personality. It's a simple concept. A warrior who's 10 years old with hundreds of years of battle experience but 0 actual years of experience being an individual. He's immediately told his individuality matters not, but because of that, he speaks in this cadence of a serviceable knight while not actually being one, and that's a complicated person with attention span way to say. The dialogue quirks are immediately funny. That shall be upon his adversaries, lest he misses dinner! He's also like 10, so that means he's not as concerned about the end of the world as every other character, which helps a lot with the tone of the series. I genuinely cannot express how much his personality carries the show moment to moment. It's rare for a protagonist in a show aimed at any demographic to be so unapproachable. Like, there's just this obsession with making the audience think that they could be friends with the main character in children's media, and that's why you only get rude main characters who aren't approachable in shows aimed at adults. Imagine a kid's show starring, I don't know, Dr. House. But when they break away from this trope, you always get wonderfully interesting protagonists. Like, look at Shrek or Puss in Boots compared to the newest Disney animated protagonist. It's easier to market Paw Patrol than it is to sell Peter Griffin. And it's not like they cannot make Peter compelling, but you get what I mean. It's harder to like Squidward than it is to like SpongeBob. That's way too many characters to bring up so quickly. The Smash Tomatoes required viewing chart is getting insane. Point is, notice how most protagonists in children media are really friendly and you could get along with them easily, and then you have Niko, who is unusual and you're not supposed to get along with him easily. The show hits the ground running with high stakes and a protagonist who is charismatic but not approachable. I don't think that in itself makes it a masterpiece, but they do know where to take it. There's not a dull moment in this series. Oh, and don't let me forget the other cast members, Mancock and Flicker. Okay, he's not actually called Mancock. That's just my affection on nickname for him, and then Flicker is this fantasy creature that they can use to add visuals when Lyra is talking to Niko about like the lore and stuff, which is pretty clever design. I guess you could draw some parallels between the cast here and the cast of Avatar if you tried really hard, but I think they managed to make their own unique cast here. Comparisons would be kinda forced. Like, sure, compare Mancock to Sokka, but you'd be way off the mark. I understand maybe they're both supposed to be like the comic relief of the group, but at the same time, they're completely different on what they teach the protagonist.
At least there's nothing in these pots that's trying to crush us.
One thing I loved about this cast is how every character in the main group is supposed to be some sort of mentor to Niko. Lyra teaches him about fighting, what his destiny is, humanity, and other assorted goods. Meanwhile, Manhor teaches him about surviving in this destroyed world and the sort of people who live there. They're different representatives from the universe that we're in that all come together to destroy the ultimate evil, and therein lies the beauty of this show. The premise, as I've discussed, is so far all about this kid who was destined to defeat evil, but that's just the narrative is told, the responsibility he bears. The reality is far from it, because essential to this show is the idea that the hero is still a person. They cannot defeat evil on their own, and not in a power of friendship kind of shenanigan or an apes together strong kind of shenanigan, but rather it's all about saying that destiny is not accomplished in solitude. Not to mention, the hero being a person comes with its own set of complications. He is more than just someone destined to beat up a bad guy. And the story is written so that if the character wasn't to understand that, there is no way for them to win. One doesn't help the world in a single strike. Hey look, this character is a turtle! I hope you didn't learn any sort of disturbing fact about turtles a bit ago. That all being said, it's kind of a shame the show looks like it does. In moment it doesn't look too awful, except Mancock, he looks terrible most of the time, but like, the fight scenes range from flashy to actually fucking awesome, but that's cause those actually have budget, which means that otherwise the show doesn't look too approachable. Also, Niko's design is stupid. Why does he have the parking lot hairdo? Simply put, this show is unsurmountably underrated, and I absolutely recommend it. Okay, so yeah, you know number one, the only show in Amazon Prime that practically marketed itself. Hit it! final intermission. Did you know, because you got to the end of this video, you're really cool.
Protein tubes.
Ah yes, the peak of Prime Video's desperation. The only animated show in its service, besides Hazbin, to actually have a pretty large audience. And it was simply because, I mean, let's be fully honest, Season 1 of is magnificent. The first and last episodes of the first season have got to be the most important episodes for a show's success. Even if we have countless examples of shows that hit their stride after the first season,
Well, that was awkward. Yes, it was.
when it comes to animated stories, it's extremely important to nail the first impression. Invincible sets the stage perfectly with episode 1. It starts as a pretty normal superhero story, and then in the last few minutes of the first episode, it delivers the twist. Superman basically comes in and murders the Avengers. Hey, can you please show me the part where Omni-Man kills the fish guy with a mace, but color correct the blood to pink so it's not as gruesome, please? Okay. Nice, make sushi out of that. Now show me the part where Mark is choking out Conquest while he is pulling Mark's intestines out of his body repeatedly as Mark groans in pain and vomits blood all over the place. Wait, why is it all close up? May I see, please? Ah, there we go. Finally, some oh, no. Back to faces. Okay. What do you mean this is one of the best animated sequences this season? Seasons 2 and 4 live in Season 1's shadow, and not because they are bad, I'm putting this at first for a reason, but to be fair, I don't have much to say that hasn't already been said about the show. It's just that popular. I adore how emotionally mature the show tries to be, with actual serious discussion of what Mark and the other characters would be thinking and feeling. Omni-Man, such a good character because you can see him scrambling around to make up his mind about stuff with words he doesn't actually fully understand. Instead of turning into an allegory for Trump or Space Hitler or something like that, he's just an engaging fictional character. That is shade for the boys. I can't lie, I fuck heavy with the show not trying to be thematically heavy. There's no genius narrator or stuff you can point to that foreshadows plot beats or anything like that. Playing it straight is one of the show's strongest moves because it aims to be a story that could be applied to reality. I will never say no to a show that has pros and exaggerates stuff from real life to complement its message and themes, but does something smart by not having those elements. It works so much better for the story that they want to tell, which is simply a more mature hero story based on realistic-ish characters and scenarios. It's spontaneous, like real life. Y'all think Rexplode has constant explosive diarrhea, or am I looking too much into it? I don't hate Ember. So many people think she's annoying and I have no idea why. I understand the writing does get repetitive surrounding her because she constantly has to remind Mark that he is a normal person too, and that results in some uninteresting back and forth. Like, okay, yes, Season 1 Amber is a little rough on the logic, but I kinda like that they were still high schoolers at that point. Mark himself had to learn that being a superhero wasn't as idyllic as he's been told, and I think Amber's arc was supposed to parallel that a little bit. She's also thinking that Mark can just help better by getting stronger. Superheroes can do anything kinda logic. It probably could have been executed better, I don't think the hate is forced, but I think my take on it is something more people gotta think about, you know? Now Eve, she's a crazy character. I adore how some fictional stories have incredibly broken characters, and the best way to balance them out is to make them extremely stupid. This character can literally remove stuff from reality with a swipe of his arm, so they made him extremely dumb so he doesn't think to do that. The other way to go about it correctly is by introducing limits to the powers. If you transform too much, you age regress into a baby. And then there's the Harry Potter route, where the characters just don't do the super powerful insta-kill-you move because of moral weight or something like that. Funnily enough, Invincible does tackle such a theme, but not enough when it comes to Adam Eve, which is crazy because they made her and she's an insanely powerful character that can turn anything into anything. And sure, they tried making her dumb to explain why she doesn't just turn the Boltromites into goo, I don't know, turn their blood into acid or something. But no, she's not actually that stupid, she's just stupid in the situation where her powers could solve an issue that she has. I feel like they have to be more explicit about her desire for normalcy, you know? She says some stupid stuff sometimes, under the implication that what she really means is that she wants normalcy, but it still comes off as if she's genuinely wondering whether she could afford a house despite being capable of creating raw gold. Her powers should be more imperfect, and they totally wrote themselves into a corner there, but hey, at least we now have an interesting edge case to talk about. Now Debbie, the GOAT. She's carrying humanity in her fucking shoulders. What an awesome character. MVP Queen. I will not say who to avoid spoilers, but it does make me kinda sad that one of the biggest character arcs within the show ended like it did. I guess if it wasn't for that, it wouldn't be effective, but I think what bothers me here is more about how bad the show is at killing off characters. Like, if I have to see the buff Smurfs one more time and it's not a scene where they actually die, I will have a conniption. Almost every death has been backtracked on. Somehow, the characters lived despite getting, like, hydraulic pressed. It made the real death that actually happened feel less impactful because when it happens, you figure, oh, they'll just bring him back by next season as always. They don't. That's cool, but the actual death moment was ruined. Actually, it happened again in the latest season with Conquest 2, but this time I'll allow it because it's been a recurrent character thing for him. It actually is kinda sad how well written season 4 is, aside from that one episode in hell that feels like a cutaway gag. At first I rolled my eyes at yet another sad collage of the hero saving the planet to a popular song, required reading chart, but damn episode 7. I think that's the closest the show's gotten to topping Omni-Man running through a train. J.K. Simmons keeps making memes with Omni-Man, and I can't lie, it makes me happy.
Sure?
Other plot points I loved were Powerplex. I think having an antagonist whose motives are incorrect for the most part is amazingly interesting. It fits perfectly within the world Invincible has implemented. And Cecil! I need you, Cecil! Is just an enjoyable character, and that's not just because he looks like I hopefully will at 35. My hairline's starting to recede and I still have student loans to pay. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff I didn't love. The Martian storyline feels like something that should have ended already. Daft Punk and the rest of the Order feel kinda stupid considering there's a lot of intergalactic threats happening. I do like Titan a bit, but I feel like his storyline is too similar to characters like Walter White and Tony Soprano with their families, without changing much besides being placed in a fantastical setting, so it's not different enough to avoid comparisons. For me. I could go on and on about each charismatic and entertaining character in the show. I thought I was gonna dislike Oliver, but he fits very nicely in there. I love that Bro has not learned to not challenge the strongest guy in the group. It calls back to Mark doing the exact same thing during season 1, but for some reason when the Grapechild does it, people call him stupid. I also enjoy Alan quite a bit, but again, all stuff you've heard. We'd be here all day and not saying anything cool. And so, I guess there's only one thing about this show that we need to talk about. I can't lie. One of the reasons why season 1 was so effective was because they weren't afraid to show you the scene. They had the budget, they had the time for it. This show's personality is all about removing the glamour from superhero tales, actually showing the weight and brutality these heroes would be experiencing. And even though after season 1 they have one of the best casts ever, beautiful storyboarding and pacing, and even a waterfall of brutal moments, they never reached the height of the first season, simply because this show is one of the very few keeping Prime Video clients in the platform altogether. They are scared. Afraid people will somehow stop thinking the show is relevant and cancel their subscriptions. Heck, it's time we get into it. Prime Video's biggest strength has always been that it's tied to Amazon Prime's subscription service itself. In recent years, they began shoving ads and introducing more expensive payment plans because everything has to get expensive at max speed now or investors are gonna get angry and stop being the main source of income for the people running the companies. Usually, Prime Video looks like a really healthy service statistically. As of March 2026, it's been reported that roughly 3.8% of total streaming time is dedicated to Prime Video. But when you look at the quality of the service, something doesn't add up. I mean, sure, its increasing popularity has been real small compared to the other services. YouTube's seen a 4% increase since 2023, Disney Plus has seen a 3% increase, Netflix a 1%, while Prime Video has only gotten an increase of 0.4%. And keep in mind, these charts I'm showing you are meant to make the services look good. Ever notice how companies now always find a way to report higher numbers than last quarter? The part of the equation that really makes this statistic of Prime stand out is that every other service is standalone. YouTube's free, so of course its increase is going to be noticeable, but Netflix, Disney Plus, and even Paramount Plus all have a larger increase, services that people buy specifically to stream shows. Amazon Prime Video has always been a bonus tacked onto Amazon Prime itself, and I'm sure if they split up the services, they'd still report higher numbers somehow. But the ugly truth is very noticeable to the consumer who is not looking at the stock price but at the actual product. The product is shit. People have Prime Video because they have Prime. Peep this stat if needed. Those benefits far outweigh whatever the service has in store. Because outside of the backlog they purchased from MGM a few years ago, the service has a strikingly small amount of shows under its belt, especially when it comes to originals. And their animation foray is such a clear example. It straight up makes me haha, it gives me a belly fucking laugh. Premiered in 2021. Monkey Kid 2021 and they don't even own it. Niko and the Sword of Light 2017. Undone 2019. Vox Machina 2022. Custom Quest 2019. This means that over half their critical bangers, according to me, premiered prior to 2023. But talking commercially, there's a reason why they release about 2 animated shows per year. They have no fucking idea about what they're doing. Heck, maybe they don't even care. Spanning 2014 to 2019, they were creating a ton of kids shows as well as giving promising pilots from 2015 a chance at a full series production. Then in 2020 we had the pandemic, leading to no releases except for maybe Monkey Kid outside of Amazon Kids. And from 2021 to 2024, things seemed fine with almost all their popular shows. Hazbin, Vox Machina, and yet halfway through that, all of a sudden, they go back to eating shit. They stopped caring. The consumers were not watching the shows, and they probably chalked it up to the quality of the shows, because the profit margin would, in a worst case scenario, actually decrease if they were to invest on advertising. I think their only commercial success since 2024 is the Fujimoto show, which they simply produced and got exclusive streaming rights for. A show which, unsurprisingly, marketed itself by virtue of being tied to one of the biggest names in Japanese animation last year. And so, they get desperate. They greenlight seasons of shows they previously rushed into ending. They fall back on their strategy to make evergreen content for children. They produce an ad campaign and call it inspired by Love, Death and Robots. Those air quotes are so massive they give Airbot a run for his money. And then their upcoming projects are all neatly lined up with this ridiculous strategy that they already know doesn't work. Upcoming are shows like Oddjobs and whatnot, which are simple, cheap licenses for niche products that they think could do well, and they absolutely can be great, maybe even profitable. If only Prime Video would stop, think for a moment, and actually show us why these shows are worth our time. Instead, they need some silly YouTube rabbit prick who doesn't even have anything better to do to advertise the fucking shows for you, to the best of its ability at least. And what is the primest example of their failure at marketing? Invincible. That's right, not title card this time, because Prime Video does not deserve it. Can you please stop rushing the team making the show just so you can pretend that people actually watch your shows? Because that's the strategy. Release some more Invincible, pretend that all those people that are watching Invincible are actually watching some sort of other show. We're seeing profit margins, people. The quality types in Invincible are palpable. They would moan back if I decided to slap them. They want to produce this show as cheaply and as quickly as possible, as feasible even. And it shows, because they have a golden ticket with Invincible, amazing cast, amazing writers and animators working on one hell of a project, and instead of having at least one animated show which is anywhere near comparable to Netflix's best, you dump it out, corn pieces and all, and tell us this is what happened after you had the most delicious rib hamburger and churned it through your digestive system in a rush to keep your relevancy. This is not the treatment Invincible deserves, and not the treatment any of the top 5 deserve. I'm trying, audience member. I'm trying to make you see the good stuff hidden underneath a greedy company who cannot fathom respecting its own product. Amazon Prime Video has so many amazing ideas, relegated to stats that they control but refuse to put any risk into. But in the current age of corporationism, I guess fuck the product, right? Fuck the art.